Let's start. It's 5:30 now. Good evening. Hello and warm welcome to all the dignitaries, elite speakers of the day, our pride, our past chairman, our regional director of Middle East and Africa, media houses, all my seniors and fellow members, to this very important event on importance of code of ethics in our professional lives. As professionals, we have responsibility to act in an ethical manner at all times, not just for the sake of our own integrity, but also for the trust and confidence of those who rely on our services. Let's have a look at this picture. Perfect. Mere paas maa hai. Meaning, I have our own mother with me. An iconic scene from an iconic movie, Diwar of 1975, is a classical image I can think of. 4 words, mere paas maa hai. Literally, in subtle way it says, I am ethical. A code of ethics is a set of guiding principles that outlines the moral and ethical values that we as professionals are expected to uphold in our work. It serves as a standard of conduct that helps us navigate ethical dilemmas and ensures that we act in the best interest of our clients, colleagues, and broader community. UAE introduced new updated law regarding code of ethics and professional conduct for accountants, and this law most likely applies to all accounting activities, including audit, tax, and advisory services. It includes the principles of integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional competence, and professional behavior. We'll come to know in detail on it when our first speaker takes the stage and helps us understand its coverage and implication. But before we move further into the session, we have to do the first thing first. We need to pay respect to our home country, India, and to our second home, UAE, by reciting their national anthems. This will be followed by motto of our institute, which gave us our identity. I will request all to rise from your seats for national anthems, and I see your motto, please.
जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रदब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैता 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 एतद्वैता.
Thank you all. Please take your seats. I like the part when members were walking in and the moment the national anthem was going, they stayed back there. That is the respect which we are required to pay, and I loved that our members did the same thing when they entered. Thank you very much for that. Moving on. It's time to move on and invite our chairman of the chapter, CA Hari Kishan Rankawat, on the stage for his chairman's address. Please put your hands together for the person leading the chapter from the front, our chairman, CA Hari Kishan Rankawat.
Speaker of the day, CA Sanjeev K. Chaudhary, CA Dheeraj Rana Saria, Miss Sakina Dikanwala, Vice Chairman CA Rajesh Somani, my colleagues in the Managing Committee, and respected members of the chapter, a very good evening to all of you. And I welcome each one of you to our event today on AML, Code of Ethics, and Auditor Certificate process, which we will understand from Dheeraj. Ladies and gentlemen, our today's topic reminds me of a quote by a famous American lawyer and judge, Potter Stewart. Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. In accordance with the guidelines published by the International Ethical Standards Boards for Accountants, ISBA, the Abu Dhabi Accountability Authority, ADA, announced the approval of a code of ethics. For your information, the International Ethics Standard Board for Accountants, based in New York, is a renowned independent organization which is working at the leading edge of cutting ethical standards for accountants. From December 31st onwards, accountants and auditors in UAE will have to adopt this code of ethics. Statutory auditors are required to elevate audit quality and uphold the principle of transparency, integrity, objectivity, accountability, due diligence, confidentiality, and professional conduct. Further, this code of conduct emphasizes how fundamental it is for accountants and auditors to preserve non-conflict of interest and objectivity while preparing financial statements in conformity with international standards and procedures. Our Ethical Standard Board of the ICAI has also revised the 12th edition of Code of Ethics, which has come into effect from 1st of July 2020, and there are 3 volumes of our Code of Ethics. 4th edition of the Code of Ethics was issued by the ICAI in Feb 2021 by Ethical Standard Boards under the guidance of C. Atul Gupta, our former president. The ICAI prescribes the norms of right conduct for the members of the institute. So all those actually code of ethics standards issued by the ICAI is equally applicable on all of us, apart from the code of ethics which is being issued by our UAE as well. It lays down all the principles and rules which guide the members in the situation of ethical dilemmas. Today, we are fortunate to have our first speaker, learned speaker, CA Sanjeev K. Chaudhary, amongst us, who is the only Indian on the board of International Ethical Standard Board for Accountants, from whom we'll get to learn a lot of rules and ethics standards as part of the code of ethics. Now I would like to share with you the calendar of our events for the next month so that you can plan accordingly in advance. On 14th of May, we will have another event, technical event, on update on cabinet decisions for UAE corporate tax and transfer pricing. Then on 21st of May, we will have indoor cricket tournament. So I hope you guys are going to participate in that in a big number. And on 23rd of May, we will have a technical event on international standards on auditing and quality control standards. Then on 27th and 28th of May, there will be a focus group event organized by our ExCom member Sanjay Gagrani. It will be a kind of Power BI workshop. Automate your work and elevate your life. Friends, I thank each one of you for your active participation on Sunday evening. And I would like to end here with a message that luxury and lies have huge maintenance cost, but simplicity and truth are self-sustainable without any cost. So let's be truthful and simple. Thank you very much.
Love the quote, simplicity and truthfulness is sustainable. Something to take away from today's day. Thank you, Chairman C. Harikishan Rankawat, of sharing the calendar ahead with all of us. Looking forward for members to join us in large numbers for cricket tournament which is coming up. You have seen movies, right? As an actor, I stand here, I get all the visibility. But actually, if you see all the events which has been discussed by Chairman, has been planned by the Executive Committee. Give a round of applause for the entire Executive Committee who has planned the entire calendar for May for you. Without them, it was not possible. Also looking forward for members to enroll for a 2-day Power BI workshop being conducted on 27th and 28th as said by our Chairman. It's my sincere request to all the members who are still waiting on the source and thinking to jump in the ocean of Power BI, this is the right time to jump and learn swimming. Thank you, ExCom members here, Sanjay Gagrani, to work alongside Chairman and the other committee members to make it happen. Thanks a lot. You were the lead in this. Now it's time to move on and jump straight into our first session and hear from our first speaker, CA Sanjeev Chaudhary, on Mere Paas Maa Hai, meaning Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, which we'll all need to adhere to. But before inviting him on the stage, I will humbly request our respected Vice Chairman to come on the stage and introduce the speaker to our members. Sir, please. Introduction of Sanjeev ji. Please come. A round of applause for our Vice Chairman of the chapter. Sir, तालियां जोर से बजनी चाहिए, इसीलिए वो नहीं आ रहे थे. Thank you.
Our Regional Director, Mr. Baweja, our Chairman, Mr. Harikishan Rankawat, and Evergreen Energetic Secretary, Mr. Jay Prakash, my fellow committee members, dear professional colleagues. We are in such a profession where not only destination, but process of destination also require higher standard. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, CA Sanjeev Kumar Chaudhary, who is a practicing chartered accountant and the partner of BDO India LLP. He is also a fellow member of Institute since 1982, has graduated Bachelor of Commerce as well as Bachelor of Law in 1986. He is holding membership of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India since 2018, CPA Australia November 2019, and the International Ethics Standard Board for Accounting, ESBA, New York, USA since January 2019, and reappointed in January 2022. We are happy he is such a personality, such a dignitary is among us to address today. He has a knowledge and experience in handling complex tax issues, including those relating to domestic, international tax, transfer pricing, and taxation of cross-border transactions, regularly representing clients before various tax authorities, including Appellate Firm and Competent Authority of India on complex tax issues. Sanjeev ji handle large expatriate engagement in both advisory and compliance matters, including compensation structuring, foreign exchange regulation, employee stock options, plans, and worked on both inbound expatriate and outbound assignment in respect of various Indian and overseas companies. He is a member of FICCI Tax Committee since 2015. He was our Central Council member 2 times. And with this, I request Sanjeev ji kindly address and give a big round of applause to him. Thank you.
First of all, thanks to Mr. Harikishan ji for inviting me. Dheeraj ji for helping me with all the logistic challenges. Jai Prakash ji for his energetic introduction कि मेरे पास माँ है, and the Vice Chairman for the nice introduction. Now straight, I think, coming to the topic for the day, I think I have probably 55 minutes to an hour. And then you can, tell me 5 minutes before and I will, adhere to the time, because I always believe that the first speaker should not get away with this and do not take away the time of the second speaker or the third one. So I'll stick to the time. I think when Harikishan ji called me a few days back, I did ask him, what do you want me to cover? Do you want me to cover the our institute's code of ethics, or what ISBA has done? And his point was that let's look at what ISBA has done. So let me at the outset also clarify 2 things. Our institute has actually always followed the ISBA code. And when I look at the earlier edition, which was the 2009 edition of our institute, it was basis the 2005 edition of ISBA. And ISBA has been changing the code almost every 2 years, revising the code. And when I was in the council, I had the privilege of chairing the Ethical Standards Board in 2018-19, which was my last year at the council. We revised the code basis the 2018 code of the ISBA. And we actually adapted because we had to make some changes to the code to make it applicable to the Indian laws. To just give you one example there, in India we have a rotation of firms under the Companies Act. ISBA doesn't have that. So we had to make changes to the code to ensure that our code meets the Indian requirements while also looking at what ISBA is doing. Because as a member of IFAC, we have a responsibility of looking at those changes and looking at them as to what should be done in our country. So very briefly, what I intend covering today is about ISBA. What is ISBA actually? The code, some recent pronouncements, and I'll very briefly touch upon them. What is work in progress for us as we speak? And then happy to take questions. ISBA actually has 18 board members from all over the world. And it is, as Harikishan ji said, it is an independent global standard setting board. It has a responsibility for setting ethical standards for accountants world over. Now, those standards which are set by the Ethical Standards Board are only recommendatory, because ISBA cannot tell, say, UAE as a country or India as a country that you must follow these standards. These are international standards, debated, discussed, but these are all recommendatory. Each country can look at it. Some countries have adapted as it is, like Australia and New Zealand, US. Canada hasn't. Some countries haven't. And as Harikishan ji said, it was, I think, last month only, mid-March, when the ISBA board meeting took place in Abu Dhabi. That was the time they announced that Abu Dhabi as a country, the accountability authority, is adapting the ISBA code from this December. So they have just now adapted the code as it is. This board actually earlier used to come under IFAC, which is the International Federation of Accountants. And there has been a long debate as to, is it independent or is it not? Or should it be more independent than what it is today? And there was a monitoring group which was set up about 5 years back. They recommended that this board, like the other board, which is IAASB, which is the International Accounting and Assurance Standards Board, should move out of the control of IFAC and should be housed under a separate foundation. And obviously these things take time. In January 23, an International Foundation for Ethics and Audit has been set up, which is an independent foundation, where there are 4 PIOB members as trustees, and there are 2 members from IFAC. So the majority will be now from Public Interest Oversight Board. And this board, this foundation now will run these boards. Not that they were not independent earlier, but I think in form also they should be independent. And I think that was the thought process with which this change has taken place. Going forward, this code, we have now the 2022 edition, which I would refer to as I go along. I'm carrying this book because I would refer to some sections of this book as I go along. This code is applicable to all professional accountants, whether in business. So the ISBA uses the word PAIB, Professional Accountants in Business, which actually means professional accountants in service in India. We use the word in service. The ISBA uses the word PAIB, Professional Accountant in Business. So this applies to all professional accountants. It is a principle-based code, and I'll explain as I go along. The earlier edition was adapted by about 130 jurisdictions, and the 2018 edition has been adapted by about 90 jurisdictions. A number of large firms, and I'm told there are about 34 international network of firms which follow this code for their transnational audits. I may also point out here that generally when you look at the code, it is always looked at as if it is applicable to auditors and audits. And I think that's the wrong philosophy. To an extent, yes, that perception is right, because you are looking at independence of auditors, and audit is one of the test function is one of the important areas where we do the work. But you'll see as I explain it in the subsequent slides, the applicability of the code is to all professional accountants, and I'll also show how the newer areas are getting covered. One of the task forces of which I was a member, we issued an exposure draft, and I'll explain that as I go along. All the board members, the 18 members on the board, they act in their individual capacity. So if you look at my case, and I'm giving that as an example, my name actually was nominated by the institute. But when I present there, I am presenting in my individual capacity. It is not that I'm representing the institute. Because if tomorrow I say something, the institute can't be held responsible. So therefore, I think they draw a line to say that you appear and you are a member in individual capacity. We have a consultative advisory group called CAG. CAG has about 28 members, which are from businesses, from regulators, from investors, etc., etc. And they also advise the board on the new issues coming up. They give their inputs as to what are their thoughts on a particular issue. So there is a CAG which kind of looks at us. In our board meetings which take place, we have a PIOB member sitting and observing the meetings. And that PIOB member will then report back to PIOB whether the meetings are conducted properly or not. Is it that the agenda items were discussed, deliberated? The members were allowed to speak or not speak? So there is a PIOB member who will sit through the meeting. So if it is a 5-day meeting, the person will sit there for 5 days, observe. The member is not allowed to vote because he or she is not a board member, but the member will be there to observe that the meetings are conducted properly. So to ensure that there is a proper deliberation on the issues. We have a proper exposure draft process. So when we issue an exposure draft, it is issued generally for 90 days. It is not that you issue it for 30 days. A shorter time frame. We give enough time to people. Each and every comment coming on that exposure draft is first looked at by the task force, who's looking at the issue. Then it is put forward before the board as to who has given what comment and how that comment has been dealt with. It is possible that the comments are not accepted. It is possible that the comments are accepted and the exposure draft is modified accordingly. So there is a proper deliberation and in a very transparent manner. Our board meetings can be seen by people on YouTube. They are recorded. There are observers sitting and observing the meetings. So there's a very transparent process of holding the meetings. And whenever a new standard is issued, after it is approved by the board, it goes to PIOB for approval, which is the Public Interest Oversight Board. So there is a complete process of issuing any change to the code. And I've gone through this in the last 5 years, so I can assure you that there's a proper deliberation on each comma, full stop, each word by the task forces first, by the board later, exposure drafts, comments, and then there is a deliberation, and then the final things are issued. Now just look at what are the recent refinements to the code, and this is after 2018. We had a publication on role and mindset, which was issued in, I think, 2020, effective December 21. We issued a number of changes on NAS, which is the non-assurance services, fees, objectivity. Now, these documents were issued all in December 20 to be made applicable from December 22. So you will see, whenever something new comes up, there is enough and more time given to people to look at the change, look at how they need to respond to that change. Because it cannot be that, you do something on 31st March and say it is applicable from 1st April. No, it doesn't happen like that. At times, we've given 2 years' time for people to look at the change and make changes to whatever they're doing. We have this February issued something on engagement team audits, which is applicable from December 23. We've changed the definition of public interest entity, technology changes, which will be applicable from December 2024, which is the next year. Documents issued today, approved by the PIOB today in February 23, applicable from December 24. So there is enough and more time given for people to change. Now, this is the building blocks architecture, I would say. This is how the code is divided. Part 1 basically contains 3 chapters. 1, complying with the code. 2nd is on fundamental principles. 3rd is on conceptual framework. And these sections are from 100 to 199. And I'll just touch upon some of them as I go along. Part 2 is applicable to professional accountants in business. That is, people who are in employment. Part 3 is applicable to professional accountants in public practice. Part 4 and 4B, which is the most bulky part of this code, 4A is applicable to independence for audits and reviews, and 4B is applicable to independence for assurance other than audit and review. So 1 is audit and review engagements, 4B is other than audit and review, and the last part is glossary. Now this structure actually came up in 2018, and let me just address 2 points here before I go further. Every section of the code, you will find first an introduction. There would be some paragraphs which are worded with R, which is the requirement section. That change has been brought about to convey to the members that R means it is required to be followed. You don't have a choice. And the word used in the requirement section is shall, not that you should do this or you could do this. It says the member the professional accountants in practice shall do this. There's no option given. And then is the subsequent paragraphs, which is the application material, which will explain what is contained, what is it that you're supposed to do. So the whole structure of the code has undergone a big change. And I remember when in 2018, and I'm just kind of certain things I'll relate back to what we did in India, because majority of us are from the Indian Institute here. We approved the code in February 2019. I remember first week of February because the term finishes in 12th of February. And we made it applicable from 1st April 20, after a year. Because of COVID, we shifted it by 3 months. It became July 20. The idea was to give a year plus to members to understand the code. I think the challenge is, which I think you will see it is when you implement it, is in the implementation. The implementation is the key. The code is beautifully worded. And I'll take you along through some of the definitions I go along. As Prakash ji said in the beginning, mere paas maa hai, the responsibility on us, and I keep reminding of this sentence time and again. Now, our code actually starts with the first line, and I want to read that. Where is the responsibility comes on us? When you say complying with the code, the introductory line, the 2 lines of the code says, a distinguishing mark of the accountancy profession is this acceptance of the responsibility to act in the public interest. So we take the responsibility, and these are the 2 lines which I just read. We take the responsibility to say that we will act in the public interest. We hold ourselves out to people to say we will act in the public interest. Why do our reports get relied upon? Are a test function or audit function? Because we say that we have the knowledge, we have the expertise. We will not only work for our clients, but we will look at other stakeholders also. And that is why at times when the questions come, what are the auditors doing? Because the people believe that you are watching their interest also. So you're not only working for the client, and that is why there is a challenge at times as to who should appoint the auditors. It is not that when you get appointed by the management that you are not independent. People believe that you are still independent. People expect from us, because of our test function, that we hold ourselves out to people to say that we'll work in public interest. So this is what para 100.1 says. If you turn the page, and this is what the R comes in, R 100.6, it says a professional accountant shall comply with the code. Just 1 line. A professional accountant shall comply with the code. Now, if I relate this to my Indian Institute for a minute, someone asked me a question, where does the code get this sanctity from? Why should I follow this code? So if you look at our CA Act, at one place it says, along with the regulations, that all the members of the institute will follow the Act, the regulations, and the guidelines as issued by the council. And this code actually is issued as a guideline of the council. I remember in the earlier days, someone had challenged us that where do you get the powers to issue guidelines? We were told that as an institute, you have the power to regulate the profession. When you have the power to regulate the profession, you have the power to issue guidelines. So it is inherent. But I remember someone challenging it in the court to say that, well, institute doesn't have the powers. And if you look at the 2022 amendment to section 15, I'm just kind of related to, for the benefit of all, it says that the institute has the power to issue guidelines. So those powers which are inherent already have now been said in as many words also, so that nobody tomorrow challenges it as to where does it come from. So if you look at, again, 100.6, it is only 1 line. The code says a professional accountant shall comply with the code. You don't have a choice. You have to follow the code. And another requirement says, and this is also very interesting, that this code recognizes the fact that each country would have its own laws. If those laws are more strict, and if you need to follow those, then you should follow those and not the code. To that extent, the code need not be followed if your local laws are more strict. So there is again a requirement, and that is why this code recognizes that. It says if there are circumstances where laws and regulations preclude a PA from complying with certain parts of the code, he doesn't have to follow it. Those laws and regulations prevail, and the accountant shall comply with all other parts of the code. So that means if your law says, follow the law, which is more strict, to that extent you need not follow the code, then you can't say, oh no, I'll follow the code. So the code recognizes our code of ethics, and the institute also recognizes it. As I explained, rotation of firms was one big challenge, which we had to incorporate in our code. I think probably Harikishan ji referred to the fundamental principles. Now, there are 5 fundamental principles which have not undergone a change in the last at least 30 years and 40 years. I have seen the code, the international and the Indian code, which are integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional competence, and due care, and your behavior. Now, each of these 5 fundamental principles, coupled with the independence provisions, creates a conceptual framework. But if you look at the 5 fundamental principles, they are again explained in the code, and I'll just read 1 or 2 of them. I don't want to, I can read all of them, but the way they have been explained, I just want to bring home that point. What do you mean by integrity? Integrity means to be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships. That's the definition of integrity. It again further explains what it means, but the definition which is given beginning is integrity to be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships. We'll look at professional competence and due care. Why do clients come to us? They believe that we are professionally competent. Are we updated? Do we update ourselves because of the changes? The client believes you are, and that is why they come to us. So the professional competence, if you read, it says, you should first attain. The words is professional competence and due care is to attain and maintain professional knowledge and skill at the level required to ensure that a client or the employing organization receives competent professional service, and so on and so forth. So the code says that you must have attained, and you're supposed to maintain also, because then only the client comes to you. Confidentiality, and it goes on. So I'm not going into each and every line. And then the requirement is in 110.2 that a professional accountant shall comply with each of the fundamental principles. So again, after explaining what are the 5 fundamental principles, then the code says there is a requirement that you as an accountant shall comply with each of the fundamental principles, that you will be objective, you will be following integrity principles, following confidentiality, etc., etc. So in a way, after defining each of those 5 fundamental principles, then it says that you will follow those principles to its entirety. Now, this is how the conceptual framework works. What is a conceptual framework? It says, when you're doing any work, you may have certain threats when you're doing work. And those threats are what? Those threats are these 5 threats which are explained in the code. And I'm not going to go into those explanations because I can probably take a day to kind of go into these things. But look at those 5 threats. When you're doing work, you may have a self-interest threat. What if the client leaves me? There is a self-interest threat. There is a self-review threat. You're doing a job which you might be reviewing later on. There is an advocacy threat. There is a familiarity threat. Why the rotation of auditors was advocated? Because you are familiar with the client over a period of time. Should you go on working for the client? No, there is a familiarity threat. And there is an intimidation threat to these fundamental principles which you just looked at. And how do you apply the conceptual framework? The code says that a professional accountant shall apply the conceptual framework, which is given here, to identify, evaluate, and address those threats to the compliance with all the fundamental principles. So you have to see whatever work you're doing, is it creating a threat? So how do you apply the conceptual framework? It says you must have an inquiring mind. So when you're doing work, you must have an inquiring mind. You must exercise professional judgment. Because if you're an inquiring mind, then only you'll go into the questions that by doing this work, am I compromising or am I not following the fundamental principles? When you exercise the judgment, you must use a reasonable and informed third-party test. And again, the code explains what is meant by this reasonable and informed third-party test. It says basically someone else who's not an accountant, what he or she will do in the similar circumstances. You should look at that and then decide. So this is how the conceptual framework works. So you have to look at these threats. You have to ensure either the threats are eliminated or the threats are reduced to a level of acceptance, that they're acceptable. And that is how you will move on. If you can't eliminate the threats or you cannot reduce threats to an acceptable level, then you may end up taking some actions like maybe walking away from an assignment. Again, the code explains what needs to be done. Coming to part 2 and part 3, it is professional accountants in business and in practice. And this is how these chapters are divided. These chapters will keep on undergoing a change as we go along. Something which is not listed here is, I will come to that a little later. But what I now intend doing is I'll touch upon a couple of these topics so that I bring home the point on how this code is to be read and applied. So if I look at professional accountant in the business for a minute and I look at section 220, which is preparation and presentation of information. So it is someone who's in job, professional accountant in business, who has to prepare and present the information. Now, what is he supposed to do when he looks at the code? Now, I think it is to be accepted that the preparation and the information being presented is in accordance with the relevant reporting framework. So there is a reporting framework, you are following that. And this is relevant to both financial and non-financial information. Now, what does the code say as a requirement on this part in para 220.4? It says as a requirement, and again, I'll briefly touch upon a few things. It says when preparing or presenting information, a PA shall prepare or present the information in accordance with the relevant reporting framework. That's first thing. It says prepare or present the information in a manner that is intended neither to mislead nor to influence contractual or regulatory outcomes inappropriately. Now, each line has to be read very carefully. So you should not be doing anything which is intended neither to mislead nor to influence contractual or regulatory outcome. You should not omit anything with the intention of rendering the information misleading. It should not be that you render something, you miss out something. By missing out, the whole thing will become misleading. So you're not supposed to do that. It also says that a PA shall avoid undue influence of or undue influence on individuals at the organization and be aware of the risk of bias. So there are about 6 or 7 things listed. Then when you are working, preparing or presenting the information, what are you supposed to do? You can't omit information which is relevant, you can't give incorrect information, it should not be biased, etc., etc. So this is again a requirement. Then it says you must exercise professional judgment when you're looking at the information. You need to exercise judgment to see what should come and what should not come. And it again explains what is meant by professional judgment here. You may be relying on the work of others. And this is increasing day by day now. I mean, with ESG coming in, and I'll come to that later, when you rely on the work of others, what precautions you're supposed to take as a professional accountant? Because you're relying on the work of others to prepare the financial information. What steps should you take? What happens when you know or you have reason to believe that the information is misleading? What things you should do as a professional accountant in business, in service? You should go to your higher-ups. You should look at the policies and the procedures of the company. You may go to those people who are charged with governance. The code explains all this. The code also says that maybe you end up reporting to an authority. What should you do if the information is misleading? In fact, the code goes on to say, which is and it is again a requirement of the code. It says, if after exhausting all feasible options, the professional accountant determines that the appropriate action has not been taken, that means the employer is not listening, information is inaccurate, the professional accountant is saying it is inaccurate, but the appropriate action has not been taken, and there is a reason to believe that the information is still misleading, the accountant shall refuse to be or to remain associated with the information. You have to take steps to ensure, and that is where I think probably initially someone said there is a pain, a simplicity and being ethical. These are long-term benefits. But I think short-term, there are pains in all this. The question is, what should you do? The code says you have to disassociate yourself with that information. You can't be associated with it. How you should do that is again something to be seen. And then there is stress on documentation. Because if I look at, I don't know how many of you would have seen the orders from the National Financial Regulatory Authority in India in the last couple of years. There is so much stress on documentation today that it is mind-boggling now. I mean, if you look at these orders which are public document, the NFRA is asking the auditor that if this was the question, how it was settled. The reply from the consultant is saying, well, I had regular meetings with the CFO, the financial controller. These issues were discussed. They said, but where is the documentation? Show that. Now, you may not have documentation for each and every issue, but I think the thrust is that for all major issues, you need to have documentation. That is what the regulators want. There's a cost of doing business, right? There is a cost of doing the work. But you cannot land yourself in a problem tomorrow for saving the cost today, not having the documentation, and then creating a problem for yourself. Easy to say, difficult to implement, but you see these orders coming from the authorities, so what choice do you have? I don't think one has a choice there. So there are these kind of changes coming in. Now the next part I think is something which probably has very far-reaching consequences. NOCLAR. NOCLAR actually stands for NO is non-compliance with other laws and regulations. Now, this, I think, was one matter which was discussed, debated for a number of years in the US in the board. It was much before I joined the board. In the 2018 code, it was already there. So when I went to the board in 2019, we were told that this was one matter which took the maximum time. 2 new sections were added to the code. 260 for PAIB, which is the Professional Accountant in Service and Business, and 360 is Professional Accountant in Public Practice. So these sections are very exhaustive. What is NOCLAR actually? If you see the definition of NOCLAR, it says, any act of omission or commission, intentional or unintentional, committed by a client or employer. So if you're in practice, it will be a client. If you're in employment, it is the employer. Or by those charged with governance, or by the management, or by other individuals working for or under the direction of the client or the employer, which is contrary to the prevailing laws and regulations. Very wide, which is contrary to the prevalent laws and regulations. Now, there is an expectation, as I said at the beginning, from us. The ISBA board says that this NOCLAR is applicable to all assignments which you and I do, be it tax, be it advisory, be it audit, be it internal audit, anything. In India, actually, we started with saying, okay, let's make it applicable to audit only first. Then we said, let's make it to listed entities first. And today, the council has made it only to the listed entities of a certain size. So it is absolutely, if I may say so, absolutely wrong on the part of the council to dilute it to that extent. ISWA says applicable to all assignments of whatever nature. In India, we thought, let's start with the listed entities first because my members may not be well read. And if I look at, for a minute, in India, there are about 15 lakh corporates. Out of 19, about 4 lakhs have been taken away, deleted. There are about 7,000 or 8,000 or less than 10,000 listed companies. So we said, okay, let's start with the listed companies first. This was the decision taken in 2019. Today, it is applicable to maybe a few hundred only. It will get applicable is what the council says, but I think we have diluted it. Having said that, coming back, this actually was required to ensure that the auditor doesn't get away by resigning as an auditor, which is happening today also. The auditor has a responsibility. When you see something, can you keep your eyes closed? And I'll give you one example, which I had given it in some earlier discussions also. I think a lot of you would have followed the Indian press. 2 buildings which were constructed by a developer in the NCR region were demolished on the orders of the Supreme Court. They were constructed illegally. Now the question is, the accountant who was working in the job, was he not aware about it? The auditor, when he did the audit, did he come across something and still kept his eyes closed? That is what is non-compliance with other laws and regulations. It is not only the financial information which is relevant, it is the other laws also which if it is a big problem where the other stakeholders are impacted, then you must use your judgment and report. One is not saying that you become an investigator, no. But if during the course of your audit, and this is what the code very clearly says, that if during the course of your audit you come across something which is a non-compliance with other laws and regulations, what should you do? And the other laws are, as an example, which is on the right side, if your client or your employer is doing fraud, bribery and corruption, there is a terrorist financing, there is money laundering, there is data protection issues, there is environment protection issues. Should you not report? Because there is an expectation from you to report. And I think the code says you must report. What is not covered? Matters that are clearly inconsequential, small issues, forget about it. Someone said, if there's a fraud of 1,000 rupees, what should I do? I think ignore it. Personal misconduct which is not related to the business of the company. You're not supposed to go into the personal conduct of the CEO, the CFO, or those charged with governance. Non-compliance other than by the client or the employer. I mean, if it is a large company, say 10,000 people, will you be looking at an act done by everyone? Or it is the senior people, the CEO, the CFO, the management, the board, etc., the key people. Just look at the example I'm giving you now. If you are the auditor of a company and there is non-compliance, what does the code say very clearly? It says, the auditor needs to obtain an understanding of the matter. This is how the code explains as to what you should do. The code says the auditor needs to obtain an understanding of the matter when they become aware of non-compliance. There's no investigation required. If the auditor identifies or suspects non-compliance, they need to discuss with the management so that you are able to address the non-compliance. You are able to deter if it is something which is about to happen or is in the process of happening. And if it is still going on, then disclose to an appropriate authority. There is a section which is there on imminent breach. And I'll just refer to this because this is important. The international code actually captures, there is a section which is again a requirement, which says that in exceptional circumstances, it doesn't say that in every circumstance, but in exceptional circumstances, the PA might become aware of an actual or intended breach or intended conduct that the accountant has reason to believe would constitute an imminent breach of a law or regulation that would cause substantial harm to investor, creditor, etc. The question is, if you see something is happening, what should you do? It's like someone is standing in front of you holding a gun. He's not shot you. Till such time he's not fired a shot, will you keep quiet? Or you should raise a concern when you see someone holding a gun and is about to, shoot a person. I'm just giving an example of an imminent breach. And the code says in exceptional circumstances. It is not every breach. And the reason why I'm stressing on this is that in our code in 2019, we had taken this as a part of our code, but later the council has deleted this in their wisdom. And it is not my view which would prevail, it is the council's view which would prevail. But an imminent breach is something which I thought was a good provision to have. If you're talking about an ethical conduct, then I think it is a good provision to have as to what is imminent breach. Because there's an expectation from us. And this is one section which talks about documentation as a requirement. It doesn't say that you're encouraged to have it. At a lot of places, the code says you're encouraged to have this as a documentation. But for this, the code says very clearly that you must have the documentation, because if you have looked at the breach or non-compliance with some other laws, and you have taken a position not to report, because you have to use your judgment. Now, how do you prove that tomorrow that you looked at it and decided against it? You can take a view. There is nobody who's stopping you. You have to use your professional judgment. And that is why the documentation is very critical for these kind of issues, I think, which you must make note of. I'm sure there will be an implementation, some body will look at the implementation, and I think this code is so well drafted. Again, having said that, it is prone to changes. Times are changing. We have looked at technology in a very big way as to how those changes have changed the code now. But this is one section which has very far-reaching consequences. I'll touch very briefly upon one more section of the code, which is on pressures. Again, going back to integrity. Can you say that I will do something wrong because there was a stress on me or there was a pressure on me? That's no excuse. The code very clearly says that. If you look at section, there's 111.1, and there are two parts to the code, which talks about, this is a part of the fundamental principles again, which talks about integrity and the pressures, how they go hand in hand. It says the PA shall comply with the principle of integrity, which requires an accountant to be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships. That's a requirement. And as I explained, then there are application material. And just look at what the application material says here for this part only. It says integrity involves fair dealing, truthfulness, and having the strength of character to act appropriately, even when facing pressures to do otherwise, or when doing so might create potential adverse personal or organizational consequences. You have to work appropriately. You have to show that you have acted appropriately. And someone had asked a question, what is meant by acting appropriately? The code further explains that also. Acting appropriately involves standing one's ground when confronted by dilemmas and difficult situations, or challenging others as and when circumstances warrant, in a manner appropriate to the circumstances. Look at the language of the code. It so beautifully explains it. I'll tell you, when I chaired the ESB in India in the institute, my work was very limited. I had to look at this code, make a few changes to make it acceptable to what India should have. Because a lot of work has gone into this by various people sitting in ISPA. And every year they keep on doing it. I mean, I'm there for a few years, but this ethics committee and the board is there since 76 or 96. 76 was the ethics committee, 96 it became a board, and they keep on doing work on this, month after month, year after year. And all IFAC members get the benefit of that, including India. So nicely explained what is meant by, stress. It also says there can be pressures in corporates at times. What are you supposed to do? The code again says that a professional accountant shall not, again a requirement, allow pressure from others to result in a breach of compliance with the fundamental principles. That you will not allow pressure from others. And equally it says, you will not place pressure on others that a PA knows or has reason to believe would result in other individuals breaching the fundamental principles. So it is both ways. You will not allow anyone to put pressure on you, and similarly, you will not put pressure on somebody else to do things the wrong way. These sections are, listed down, various sections which talks about it. Now, I think I'll probably touch upon a few things which have changed between 2018 and now. So look at non-assurance services. Post-2018, there was again a further review done because a lot of people came back to say that your code on non-assurance services must undergo a change. The independence standards should be more strict, especially for public interest entities, because there is a public interest involved there. There are expectations of people. So there was extensive research done. These provisions on NAS and fees, as I said earlier, have been revised in April 21, which have become effective December 22. So as we speak, the new provisions have become effective. There was a lot of push to the board to look at the provisions of PI. PI is public interest entities. What is meant by listed entity, it was not clear. They said, widen the definition of public interest entity. So this definition was again looked at. And these things again have been revised in April 22, effective December 24. Again, 2 years' time has been given for these changes to be effective. I think, looking at the time, I'll touch upon some of these things. I have 10 minutes more, I think, approximately. Yeah. So if you look at the NAS provisions, the non-assurance services, the thrust has been, should there be a total prohibition on an auditor providing non-assurance services? So the code says, first of all, when you start looking at non-assurance services, first look at what are the threats for all non-assurance services. So if there's a threat, you have to deal with the threat. When it goes further, it says for public interest entities, you will not provide a non-assurance service if there is a self-review threat. Materiality is not the question anymore. The moment you see a self-review threat, the code says you will not provide a non-assurance services. I mean, if you look at what EY went through a couple of months back or the last year, their thrust was to separate the two practices so that the audit is separate and non-audit is separate. But as things stand today, that hasn't gone through. I'm sure in the next couple of years it may again happen. But I think it may also get driven by the law. At least I believe in India, the MCA may come out and say, MCA is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, they may come out and say, well, I think section 144 already says that there is a certain set of services you can't provide. They probably may come out with a total ban to say, once you are a statutory auditor of a listed entity, a public traded entity, public interest entity, no non-audit services, full stop. If you look at the NFRA orders, which are again public documents, I think there is a bit of a, at least I would say, I will use the polite word, a non-appreciation of the facts by NFRA to say that any service to the management is the management service. I don't believe in that. I think the difference has to be seen between what is a management service and what is a management responsibility. As an auditor, the code very clearly recognizes that during the audit also I can provide advice. I can give recommendations, as long as I do not assume management responsibility. That means, sitting here, I can't advise, and then go and sit there and say, well, this advice is fine. That is not correct. That, as an auditor, is not right. Absolutely correct. But any service to the management, if I look at majority of us maybe have the background of what happens in India, we have been providing tax services to the audit clients. Were we wrong in doing it? We have been doing it for 30, 40, 50 years. If the law has to change, and if this is what the government wants, I have requested, the past few presidents, that they should put forward a view and say, look, please clarify what do you want. Give us 3 months, 6 months, 1 year time, and say from this date, you will not be allowed to provide these services. Because if something has been happening for the last 50 years, I don't think everyone was wrong in doing it. The understanding is, I think everyone was right in doing it. The institute still believes that a number of services should be permitted. But if the government has to decide otherwise, I mean, they're justified to decide whichever way they want. Fees, I think, I'll just touch upon 2 or 3 things quickly. The code recognizes that over-dependence on a client, a single client, for fees can compromise on your independence. Now, what should be the amount? So that's one part. Second is, the code also recognizes that your auditor's fee should not be dependent on your non-audit services. Because somewhere the belief or the perception is that at times we do the audits at a lower fee because we have an expectation to do other services. The code says your audit fee should be de-linked with the other services. It should not be, except one exception, that if you think because of technology you are able to reduce the costs, you may reduce the fee. But you cannot reduce the fee because you expect some non-assurance services. The code very clearly recognizes. The new provisions on fees have come out very clearly to say that if it is a public interest entity, your fees for 2 consecutive years cannot be more than 15% from that public interest entity. If it is, then you have to take certain steps. And if it is gone for 5 years, the code says after the 5th year you can't do the audit. You have to step down. The exception is that supposing in public interest you are supposed to do it, then you have to record that, go to a regulator, etc., etc. And if it is not a public interest entity, they say this 15% should be 30%. So to explain this a little more, you should not be dependent on one client for whom you are an auditor, that the fee from that client is more than 30% of your total fees. That means you're over-dependent on a client, your independence and your fundamental principles can get impacted, and that is why the fee dependence should not be there on the client. Listed entity definition has undergone a big change. We have gone away from the listed entity to a publicly traded entity because listed entity itself was not sufficient. We've expanded the definition. We've also given guidance to local because we didn't want to make the definition so wide, so large that everyone has a problem. But the definition is again principle-based with the guidance as to what else can be covered. So today the pie will be a listed entity, a company which is, say, taking deposits from public, a company which is into insurance of people. Again, public is involved. And then it says other things which the laws, the regulators, and the boards can set it up. And then the board also gives examples as to how you will look at that. You may look at public interest vehicles, you may look at, like in many countries, you have public utility entities. In India, we may not have so many, but Europe, I'm sure here also. So the code gives guidance as to what the regulators should look at to widen this definition. Now coming quickly to the recently issued pronouncements, we have issued a pronouncement on engagement team and the group audit. What should be the independence of a group auditor when a component auditor is not the same firm? What are the independence requirements? This was to make it comparable with what IAASB has. This has been issued and is applicable from 15th December. So as on today, it is not applicable. There are global webinars happening, and there is a questionnaire which will come in this month from ISBA. a number of changes have taken place because of technology. What happens when you use technology? Are you competent to analyze what is happening at the back end of the technology on the information which you rely on? So somewhere you need to be competent how to use the technology and the complexity. So there's a different changes which have happened because of technology. These are the three areas of this year's interest to us in ISBA board. We are working on sustainability as a project. We are working on use of experts as a project. And tax planning, I'll take 2 minutes when I just go through a few slides. So on sustainability, the project was approved in December 22. We expect to come out with an exposure draft by this December 23. A lot of work is going on. And this exposure draft, there are 2 work streams as we speak. On the sustainability, one work stream is to look at professional agnostic independent standards. Why professional agnostic? Because in sustainability, sitting in ISBA, we have seen more than 50% of the work today on ESG front is done by non-CAs, non-PAs, non-professional accountants. And the world over it is recognized that this ESG work will continue to be done by non-PAs. So should the standards be profession agnostic? Our board believes we should try and draft those. ISBA cannot ask non-PAs to implement it because this board is a board for accountants. But I think the request will be to the countries, the regulators, the governments of the countries to say, look at these standards, because ultimately in the end it is in the stakeholders' interest. So there are 2 work streams which are working on it. One will do professional agnostic independent standards for the use for all sustainability assurance practitioners. It is assurance again. And second part will be on the ethics side. So these are the 2 work streams. We continue to use experts. I mean, you'll see a professional accountant saying, I've taken an opinion from our tax expert on tax issues. Today you'll have ESG experts, you may have technology experts. And the code uses the experts at a lot of places. So the board in its wisdom thought, should there be independent standards for experts also? And if yes, what? Because we use experts. So there's another project which is going on, and I think all these 3 will finish by December 23. That's the target as an exposure draft, so that by December 24, they become applicable. I think I'll pass some of these slides. I just want to, this I think I've already touched. Let me just touch on this and then I'll finish off. This is one area which I worked on this project as a working group. So what happens in ISBA is that there is a strategy and work plan for 4 years. So as we speak, there is a strategy and work plan for 24 to 28 or 23 to 27, which is exposed to the public to say, well, this is what ISBA wants to do. Give us your comments. Because it is for the public, in public interest we work. This project was started in 2019-20 as a working group to see whether there should be ethical standards or not, number one. Because if you look at the changing times, I mean, I've been a tax practitioner all my life. I've seen some CEOs telling us in 2000 or 90s that as long as it is legally correct, technically correct, let's go on, let's do it. I think times have changed. Today, everyone would say that even if it is legally correct, is it ethically correct? The expectations of people have changed. And I think that is why this code keeps on changing. It is not the fundamental principles have changed, no. So this code actually we worked on. In December 22, the board approved it. In February, this has been issued as an exposure draft. So as we speak, it is an exposure draft for people to comment. Last date is, I think, 15th or 18th of May. And by June, we'll have some comments. In September, we'll consider those comments in the board. In December, we'll have a final approval, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Because some comments come to say that we have to do a re-exposure, we do a re-exposure. So we are absolutely open to looking at whatever the comments are. 2 points in this, or 3 points in this I want to stress upon. We looked at, should we define tax planning? We decided not to. We again looked at, should we go into tax morality? Again, we said we will not. We have not gone into and looked at any country's tax laws. Some country may have a tax law to say have a zero tax. Some countries may give certain benefits to a particular industry. Ireland, some countries have different tax havens. So we said we will not look at any country's tax laws. We debated on the word aggressive tax planning. We said we will not go into aggressive because something which is aggressive for me may not be aggressive for you. So we looked at the issues and we said the PA should look at that the advice should be credible. We used the word credible. We debated. We can again probably change it subject to the comments coming in. But we use the word that the advice should be credible. You must look at all facts, circumstances, and the code really explains this. But the best part of, when we looked at this was that I have applied this in my practice all my life. I call it a stand back test. In my world, I used to call it a smell test. The advice is all right, but there is something wrong. Something which is not, clicking in your mind. Something which intent-wise is not correct. So this court recognizes that to say that you take a stand back in the sense, look at the advice which is credible. Then you see, does it have any consequences on the reputation, economics, etc., of the client or you, both? Because you as a professional accountant has a responsibility. And then the code obviously encourages documentation. And I think one thing which this code also adds to it is, which I ensured that we should add is, that what is the management responsibility when you're looking at this? Because every time I've seen a question is asked is, who's the auditor? Or what is the professional accountant doing? We generally don't ask a question, what is the management doing? This code can't be made applicable to the management. Having said that, we have also included a paragraph in the code to say there is a management responsibility also to the tax planning. They must comply with the laws. Because if they don't comply, they have also a responsibility. So this is one exposure draft which took us a lot of time to finish. But I think this was a huge, huge thing for public interest to look at, because as accountants, a lot of my friends have advised Vodafone. Vodafone, when they set up in India in 70s and 80s, everything was fine. When they exited in 2008, the department came back very heavily on them. And ultimately the court said, whatever you did, everything was fine, you were running a business, just because you exited doesn't mean that you're taxable. And the laws have amended thereafter. But I think to come back, what will help us in the long run is, on this issue, your advice should be credible. You must have a stand-back test. And this code also recognizes that if you don't agree with the client, you must tell them you don't agree and why also. And then document that as well. So in a way, it takes care of a lot of things as to what a PA should do. Happy to take on questions later, but I'll stop here. I can go on a number of issues, but I've kept it very broad to give you a feel of the code. It is very easy to read. It is not complex, very simply worded. It's not in lingual language like the Income Tax Act 1961 of our country, India. Very simple worded sections. A lot of connectivity at various places. And I think you don't require ethics to be coded. Ethics comes, I think, normally to all of us, naturally to all of us. But they're required to be coded because when there are litigations, when there are issues, then someone has to say, what does the rule book say? And that is why this codification is required. Otherwise, I don't think ethics is something which is, I think it comes normally to all of us. It comes naturally, it's a gut feel, nothing more than that. But thank you very much for this opportunity, sir. And happy to take the questions.
Okay, we'll start with few questions. If anyone has any questions on ethics, ethics comes naturally to us. But still, if you have any questions on ethics where you think it's not coming naturally, we need clarification. We have the speaker with us. Please go ahead and raise your hands. Committee member will come to you. I can see one hand on Rajesh ji is gone.
Sir, thank you very much for covering in detail. While going through that, it looks like that ethics are required to be followed in spirit and law in very, you can say that, meticulous manner. Considering all these things, would like to know whether advice by any professional accountant to the tax invader will be considered as ethical or unethical. Just to keep in mind that why this question has come, while the criminal lawyer is allowed to protect the criminal as a practice member, but as a chartered accountant or as a professional accountant being asked to follow the highest ethics of the world, your light on will be help us.
Yeah. So I think, in a way, I had touched upon Vodafone for a minute, but if I look at this point, and this is what this new document, which is an exposure draft, would be very helpful. What happens at times is you give the advice in year 2000. By the time the advice is tested, it is year 2010. And many events have happened in between, actually. And in hindsight, someone would say, well, this advice is not correct today. Now, advice not being correct is not a problem. I mean, advice, there are two views possible. In fact, at times there are some people say there are three views possible: his view, my view, and the right view. The third view is the right view. So I don't know, there are two views or three views. Having said that, this court recognizes that if you have done due diligence, in the sense your advice is properly researched, at that point of time, when you gave the advice, you have document to show that you did whatever was right. You have taken a view which may be contrary to the view of a judge tomorrow, but that does not mean that you can be faulted. No. Absolutely no. So take Vodafone's case again as an example. The current Chief Justice was sitting in Bombay High Court then, and he held that Vodafone is liable to tax. Vodafone went to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said Vodafone is not liable to tax. I'm not going into the technicalities right now. But it is a judge's view, right? Ultimately, a judge is also a human being, right? Judges review their own judgments. There are Supreme Court judgments which have been reviewed by Supreme Court judges. So it is a view taken, if it is a view taken consciously, clearly, and with a proper, I would say, reasonable care. I'll use the word reasonable care, because that is what is expected. Then you cannot be faulted. In fact, your documentation will support you, and this kind of code will support you much more in the years to come. When I look at the code today, I think somewhere these things are helpful to a professional, provided we document those things in a reasonable manner.
So when there is a difference of opinion, that is okay. But when you take the professional activity to protect or provide the services to the tax invader, you have to put up the case in such a manner that your client should get the less punishment or the less financial. So certainly in this process, you are presenting certain facts in such a manner that he gets benefited.
So I think to answer that question, sir, my personal view is, if you believe that your client has done things the right way, and you fight that case, but if you are saying that you want to protect because the client was wrong and you still want to protect him, then it will be unethical. I mean, that's my view. I don't want to compare myself with the lawyer. Here you have to believe in what you're doing. And if you're saying that you are ethical, then you must believe in what you're standing up for. If your client is wrong and you still want to defend him, then you're defending a wrong. I don't think then that way it will fall within the ethical framework. You see, that way Kasab went to Supreme Court and someone fought his case, right? That's a legal way of, of fundamental, principles, your right to appeal, right to justice. Here you are talking about financial matters much more. You have to believe in what you're saying. It is not just that your client, so for example, this code also recognizes that if your client wants to do something which is incorrect and you believe it is incorrect, then you walk away and tell your client, sorry, you're wrong. Let the client do it. You.
Sir, in this case, I think the board is unsure when we are doing the planning. It is at What I'm saying is,
No, I'll answer it, Avinash.
sir, it is advocacy. So what he's asking is, something have already been done. Now something have already been done, and I'm just representing him, which is at par with an advocate. Though there is a different act, so according to him, what he's saying, and I still believe that when it is a part of planning, that whether he should do it or not do it, so ethical standard says that I should not advise him. But when he have already done it, then I think I have a right to defend.
Sorry. So, Avinash, to answer your question, the words here are tax planning and related services. Now, the tax planning may have been done by you. The related services advocacy is being done by me. The court says you should not do that also. No? So, it's a... It is not only tax planning, it is services. We have provided, also defined what is related services. So how do you take a position in your tax return? You sign up on a tax return also, right? Someone has given the advice, you are the auditor, do you agree with the advice or not? So someone would look at that also, no? So there are various aspects of tax planning. Someone would have done tax planning. You can go to a lot of people who do products. What should you do when you bring a product to a client? What is your responsibility? That also the code deals with it. Actually, I have not gone into the detail of this chapter. This is a chapter which we spent about 1 year in writing actually. And we are still open to suggestions. This is not a closed chapter. This is an exposure draft done by 4 people, debated with 200 people, then the board looked at it. And that is why you expose it to the public to say, take comments. I mean, that's how you keep on, improving upon it. So if there's a comment, please have a look at it and write to us, and we'll absolutely consider it.
Sir, you just mentioned about documentation.
Yeah.
And my question is around that. To what extent does the code define the requirement of documentation of the ethical decision that you have made?
So, you see, the code actually, this is so subjective, the code cannot actually put it in black and white as to what you should do. So, at a lot of places, we've used the word you're encouraged to document. Because the moment you say you must document, then then the code is saying you must, right? For something like no-CLAR, we said you must, there is a requirement. So there is a difference between encouraged and as a requirement. That's one point. Second is the more you document the critical decisions, the more it will be beneficial for you in the long run. Because you see, what you did today, you may not remember 5 years later or 10 years later. The circumstances, because in hindsight, a lot of things change. So I think you must document when you did something, when you're giving the advice, and as long as your documentation is reasonable. Now, what is reasonable, will depend on each one of us. But the documentation does help in the long run. I've seen myself number of places. So you want to say?
Yeah, Mr. Chaudhary. I think just carrying forward that particular thing on tax planning, you were suggesting that if there is any kind of a tax planning done, but not by the auditor, maybe by another firm, and they have given them a structure which could be, which could lead them into some kind of a tax planning, which may be like a tax avoidance. Is the auditor bound in his role as an independent auditor to make a comment on that? Or to some extent, under the code, does it make it obligatory for him to do something about it?
So I think, sir, what will happen is that anything which has the impact on the financial information, and any structure would have the impact on the financial information, then the auditor has to comment on, say, the tax provisions or the accounting entries, basis that advice. Now, as long as it impacts the financials, then he has a right to comment, and he should comment.
But in his audit report, does he have to address that? In the sense, will that lead to like a disagreement resulting in a disqualification?
It can.
Sorry, qualification,
It
or
can.
an adverse opinion, or it could?
It could, absolutely. Absolutely. It can be a matter of emphasis, it can be a note in the notes to accounts. It will depend on the impact it may have. It may have, look at the balance sheet size. Is it too small a thing? A note is sufficient, a qualification is required. So I think it will depend on the facts of the case. But yes, possibility is there.
Thank you. Please give a round of applause. Sir, please, in the center. Thank you, CS Sanjeev ji, for enlightening us on important topic. One takeaway is ethics come naturally. And if it comes naturally, we'll have questions addressed by our ourselves. I will request Chairman, Vice Chairman, our past Chairman Abbas Ali Mirza to join me in sharing a token of love and appreciation on behalf of all of us with CS Sanjeev Chaudhary. A round of applause, sir, दे सकते हैं, उन्होंने 1 घंटा बोला है हमारे लिए. I will request all the ExCom members and the speakers of the day to come on the stage for a group photo. All the speakers as well as the... Sir, आप भी ExCom में ही हैं. All the speakers, please. Yeah. And the entire ExCom. Moving on to our next session. But before we jump into it, I have an interesting question for you. How many of you know what is MSME? Wait, please do not answer me. I am not the right person to say what is right and what is wrong, what is called MSME. I will call on a very handsome and equally polite person on the stage to whom you can give answers. He will not only explain us what is MSME, he will also introduce MSME awards to us. Please put your hands together for Priyesh Sethi, Senior Marketing Manager of Tally, who is known to be a marketing genius in driving brand awareness and generating demand. A round of applause. Priyesh Sethi, please come on the stage. Please let us know what is MSME and what is MSME Awards.
First of all, thank you so much, Jay, sir, for always being so nice with your words. It gives me a lot of confidence, of course, to speak in front of hundreds of people here. Thank you so much. So, first of all, a very warm welcome to all of you. As Jay Prakash sir said, right now, next 5 minutes is all about MSME. So it's very important, first of all, to understand, do we really know what MSME is? Anybody? Anybody can tell me the full form of MSME? Micro, small, medium enterprises. Wonderful. A big round of applause for you, sir. See, the problem today is not that do we know about the full form of MSME, but the problem here is that do MSMEs know about the full form of MSME? Do they know that I stand for MSME? And that's one thing that bothers me, that bothers our brand, our company, because we deal with MSME and we realized that a lot of MSMEs don't even know that they are the micro, small, medium enterprises and they are the biggest contributor to the economy. So a couple of years ago, we started this brand wagon called MSME Honors. It's to recognize the efforts and celebrate the success of micro, small, medium enterprises. Today, I'm very happy to be in front of you and announce the 3rd edition of MSME Honors. It is celebrated on 27th of June every year. And at Tally, this is the 3rd edition. I am very happy to also tell you that this year we have our jury member as chairman, Hari Kishanji. So we'll talk more about it. But before that, we'll just play a quick video for all of you. Here we go. So this is this is a small glimpse of how we celebrated this day, this big occasion in last 2 years, and we want to scale this up further this year. And like always, we definitely need your big support. So today here I am seeking your support. CAs have always been our friends and always been our supporters. So please do proceed. You can nominate your own business. You can nominate one of your clients' business where you know they have really made an impact. And there are different categories under this. So I'll request the team to also take us through a quick link. So this is the link. You can see there are 4 categories. The first category is Wonder Women category. The second category is Business Maestro. Business Maestro is nothing but someone who's running a business peedi dar peedi from generations, and he's been, stood the test of time. So we want to acknowledge such businesses. Third is Tech Transformer. With COVID, we have seen a lot of businesses have improved. They have implemented technology in their favor, and they've outgrown enormously. We want to salute such businesses. And the last but not least, e-pruner icon. Now this gives me immense pleasure to say that this 4th category you will not see in any of such award categories. This category is limited to people who do not have a trade license but e-trade license. People who are running business from home, so you can always support them as well. So with that, I would request Hari ji to also join me on stage for a minute and share about his experience being a jury in the first edition and coming up as a jury once again with us on the 3rd occasion. And I would also request Mr. Vikas Panchal, General Manager, Tally Solutions, to join us on the stage. Hari ji.
So you would like to? Yeah, last year I was one of the jury member out of 4, and there were a lot of businesses who have given or submitted their request for this award. And I tell you, we have shortlisted and we arrived at, definitely we have used independence, and finally we arrived at, under these 4 categories. And I tell you, by doing actually, once they were declared as awardee, they were actually, I think, published on their website. And Tally has got more than 50,000 customers, and as a result of which, their businesses have actually gone many-fold upside. I think 50,000 customers is right, sir? Yeah. So it's a great platform, and as a client, you guys are already into practice and consultancy, so I request you to nominate your client. You can nominate yourself as well. And Wonder Woman, I like this category. I think last year also it was there. So they are supporting the women empowerment as well. So I look forward for your support to our principal sponsor, Tally. Vikas ji, would you like to say a few words?
So good evening. I think much has been said. It's just a small contribution and effort from our side to recognize and support the MSMEs. So seeking all your support, and please do nominate. And just to add on, the jury members are all independent members. There's nobody from Tally or who will be so shortlisting the winners and everything. So it's a fairly transparent. So I will request all your support and the nominations to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. And just to make it easier for you to nominate, you can either go to Tally Solutions website, or the easier way is a tabletop is kept on your tables. You can scan the QR code and get started. Thank you so much for listening to us. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Priyesh and Vikas, for introducing MSME awards to all of us. And I'm sure many of our members who are satisfying the conditions will be applying for the awards. I'm looking forward to see all the winners in all 4 categories from ICAI Dubai chapter. Of course, our chairman is on the jury, ethically. It's time for our next session. I have one more picture to show you for the second session. I know many of you have joined me late, but many were there who have seen the first picture when we did the first session. But I'm still thinking whether it should be shown on the screen or not. If you say yes in loud, I will put the picture, otherwise I'll directly go to the session. What do you say? Should I put the second picture on the screen? Yes. Perfect. So fair enough. Technical team, please put the picture on the screen, and here it goes. The scene is again from the same iconic movie Diwar of 1975, and it says, "Bhai, tum sign karoge ki nahi?" Meaning, brother, you will sign or not. Sign or signature. the value of signature, who else will know better than us practicing chartered accountants? This session is important for all those practicing CAs who wants to obtain that power of signature for auditing and certifying financials in UAE. For our next session, we have our own XCOM member, CA Dheeraj Ranasaria, who recently obtained this power of signature by obtaining auditor's practicing certificate in UAE. Since he has gone through the process, our chairman believed that he will be the right person to guide all of us on this. While Dheeraj does not need any introduction, but it's our collective courtesy to ensure that he is formally introduced as a speaker. We'll humbly request our treasurer, CA Rishi Chawla, to come here and introduce CA Dheeraj again to all of us. CA Rishi, for you.
Thank you, Secretary Saab. And the first time I come to know that I have to introduce Dheeraj, I was really so happy that I really find him so much energetic all the time, and I really think he got that charisma in him that whatever he does, whatever he say has a lot of power. So thank you, Dheeraj, for accepting that. Dear members, speakers of the day, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you. Our next topic is how to obtain an auditor certificate in UAE. And this is definitely going to be the showstopper because this is the topic of the day, I think, which everybody, especially the chartered accountant, must know how to get that power to sign, which is very, very critical, very much important to us. I remember when I got my auditor certificate about 10 years back, the moment I got it, trust me, I really felt that I passed the CA exam because it's not that you're writing an exam, but to get that certificate, the process is so complicated. Just take your times, days, years away very fast. So recently, as you know, the auditor's law got changed and the provision of the accountancy got removed, then the exams came. So there are a lot of new good changes which has happened, and the one person who has successfully done it very quickly is our Dheeraj. He's always very been bright and got it very fast. So to talk about it, I like to introduce Dheeraj, and in one line, if I say, how do you recognize Dheeraj in the XCOM? The biggest person with the biggest smile in the XCOM is Dheeraj. So that's the easiest way to find Dheeraj. So thank you, Dheeraj. Please join me in like 2 seconds with your big smile. So Dheeraj is the managing partner of McEnroe's Chartered Accountants. He has lots of experience in statutory audits, risk control, and tax audits. He completed his CA in 2006, he did his FCA in 2014, and got his auditor registration 2023. So without holding you back more on me, let's welcome Dheeraj with big round of applause.
And thank you, Rishi, very nice introductions. Okay, I know my smile is very good now, it's fine, thank you. Before coming on our topic, how to get that auditor certificate, very small disclaimer, depend on the ministry. Because I feel everything depends on the ministry here. How I got my certificate recently, and after I got the certificate, some of members called me also. And I tried to explain him how you can get it, what document you have submitted, and how you can submit also. They submitted same documents, whatever I submitted, but still, fortunate I got it, but their decision is still pending. Okay, ministry is not accepting some documents. They are asking some more documents, some more clarifications. But same document I submitted, same document other members also submitted. Fortunate I got it. Other is still waiting for the certificate. Hope so. They will get very soon. Coming on our topic. See, I am going to present whatever practical experience, whatever steps, whatever document I submitted to the ministry and the authorities. In the whole process, mainly 2 ministries and 2 authorities involved. Ministry of Education and Ministry of Economy. Authority, I can say ACCA and EAAA, Emirates Associations for Accountants and Auditors. That also has come in picture. We will see when, why, where, which time we have to approach it. We will see, I will try to explain on that part. Whatever slides is here, all practical. Maybe others who is in the process to get the license, some additional document, additional information ministry is asking, maybe they have to submit and they should get the informations. To come on this picture, when I got it, I thought when I submitted a document, but somewhere it should be written which document to submit, why to submit it. So I did a little research and I found out some of the laws here also is there, which is law is applicable. Like first law is Federal Law number 12 of 2014. That's the first law when has come the picture, and I feel it's make difficult our life to get the auditor certificate. Because in that law it specifically mentioned you should be the Bachelor of Accountancy. And all Indians, we have the Bachelor of Commerce. So we stuck. I also stuck. I applied in 2015, but I can't do anything. I visited a lot of time for Ministry of Economy also, but they rejected all times because they are saying they are looking Bachelor of Accountancy and we have the Bachelor of Commerce. Can't do anything. After there some cabinet resolution has come, Federal Law number 14 2019 also has come. Then drastical change, Cabinet Decision 40F of 2022. That's come and become our life easy. Now procedure has changed, document has changed, we can get the certificates. Here specifically I add this ministry decision because this is not relevant to the process, but I thought when we have our first session for the ethics, let's keep one slide how the auditor also will be bounded for the which ethics. Because this was also happened when Sanjeevji sir also called me and he asked me, Dheeraj, in the UAE, which ethics I should ask, I should speak, is the ICAI or international? I thought, sir, I don't know which one. But I did a little research. I got this ministry resolutions has come. Specific they mention here, we have to go for the international standard and IAS, behavior of ethical professionals. We have to go the international who have the auditor's license. And one more thing, in our corporate tax, we are looking at the applicable standards. In this, they mention IFRS. We have to go for the IFRS if you have the auditor license. Only for the knowledge, nothing else. Now come on our process, how do we get? Yeah. Cabinet Decision 40F 2022 Article 4, they mention 6 documents. Very easy. 6 documents you have, you can get it. First document, fully qualified. You should fully qualified. Holding a valid identifications, good conduct certificate, your bachelor's holders, fellowship degree, and experience. If you have these 5-6 documents, you can get it. But backside of all these documents, that is much important. We will go one by one. Fully qualified. Who has a bachelor's? That means they are fully qualified. It can be Bachelor of Commerce, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts. They will accept it, no problem. But process can be different. Bachelor of Commerce can be different, Bachelor of Arts can be different. I am going to explain about the Bachelor of Commerce because I got through a Bachelor of Commerce. Holding valid RAD, MSIDs. Now, good conduct behavior certificate, you can get it from the Dubai police. Then certain steps, certain documents is required, like for which ministry you required, why you required, you should mention, pay the fees 1 or 2 days, you will get it. Very easy, nothing to worry it. Now here, these 3 documents, important. First, 15-hour study credit, nobody knows what the ministry want. I also don't know what the ministry want. I submitted the paper of whatever CPE hours, I got it from the institute. I submitted, I got my certificate. Others submitted, did not get the certificate. Others submitted some 15 hours Bloom training also, they got it. Others submitted, they did not get it. Sometimes they asked our transcripts of the Bachelor of Degrees. They submitted, they got it. Others submitted, they did not get it. Don't know what they want here. Very, very confusing. But try, you will get it one day. Yeah, that's how I can say it. This is practical. I submitted my CP hours, I got it. I advised the other person to submit the CP hours, but they rejected it. I told, what I can do, bro? Go again and submit another document. Now, fellowship certificate. That's an important. Full process is required. We will see in our next slides. Practical experience. 5-year experience in auditing fields is required. You have? No problem. Where and why? I'll see. Experience, 5 years. If you have Indian Yeah, out of the UAE experience for more than 10 years, you required 1 year in the UAE. Correct? But it will be counted 10 plus 1, 11 years. Fine. If you have the outside the UAE 5 to 10 years, here you should be have 2 years. If you have 2 to 5 years out of the UAE, you require 3 years experience in the UAE. Total last, if you have outside the UAE 2 years, 3 in the UAE, count 5 years. You can get your certificates, submit the ministry, they will accept it, no problem. Now, main document, fellowship certificate, how you can get the fellowship certificate. First process, you have to be approach EAAA. EAAA, Emirates Association for Accountants and Auditors. Go there, their office is in Sharjah, there Mr. Akram, Mr. Anas, they are a very helping person. They will explain you all the process there also. But first process, get the membership from the EAAA. Very easy, submit a document, you will get it. Whatever required document for the exams, we will see. Get the exam registration, pass the exams, get the certificate, submit the EAAA. We will see the in detail. See, this is a EAAA membership. You can fill the application form, bachelor degree attested in the UAE, transcripts, copy of the Emirates ID, personal photo, pay the fees, 1 day. Pay the fees, next day certificate, the same. Certificate of membership, like Emirates Association of the Accountants and Auditors, you will get it in 1 day. Nothing to worry. 1 year is a 1 year validity. Next year again, pay the fees, it will renew it. Nothing to worry this year. Now, we have to be prepared for the exam. Now the examination process has started. Correct? After you become a member of EAAA, you have to be submit a document again to them. They can send the link for the exam. Okay? What document? Here, passport copy, Emirates ID, bachelor degree in accounting, because I did accounting, attested, your transcripts attested, main document, bachelor degree accounting equivalency. This is a very, I can say, major document and time consuming document, because you have to go for the other process to get it through a Ministry of Education, and our consulate also will be involved. I got this document 5 years back. Now it's come to me, the little process also has changed. Now the data flow also has a picture. We will explain in the next slides. Your fellowship certificates, from the ICAI we can get our fellowship certificate, that exams mark sheets, and letter of the good conduct, good standing certificate of the ICAI. Or the document you get it, you have the membership for EAAA, submit it. They will verify the document and they will send you the links. They will get the links for the exam. Now the exams. All we are chartered accountant. Okay, if you go for the registration through our ICAI, you should give the 3 exams. Okay, that's all we have learned it. First, our IFRS, second, auditing, third, law. In the law, lot of laws they have to include, not only the related to our profession like VAT, ESR, but they have to include the other law also. Currently, they are taking the part, only in the part 1. In the law specifically, there are 2 exams will be happening in the future, part 1 and part 2. Part 2 will be considered a corporate tax. But still corporate tax exam is not in the applicable. If you will go for the currently exam, only part 1 give, you will get certificate. All exams will be through a ACCA. When you will get the link from the EAAA, you have to be click on the link, register yourself from the ACCA, correct? Pay the fees, get the modules, whatever subject you have going to, and study it, and you can give the exam. Exam will be held alternative month, like it's going to in the May is going to happen it, then again it's going to July, again into the September, like 1 to 20 days, every day, morning session, afternoon sections, every time exam is happening. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah. Dubai, I give the money, our British councils, there you can give the exams. All the questions will be multiple choice questions. 70 questions, you have to get the 60% clearing marks. Like 42 questions, you have to clear it, no negative marketing. no negative marking, so you will easy. Those not for the CA, nothing is impossible. It's very easy exam. And who want to go for other professional body for the through other fellowship certificate, like we are going for the ICAI, somebody has the CPA from the US, Canada, only for them one exam will be applicable. That is for tax. Because there are 6 bodies, they are saying for these 6 bodies like AICPA, CPA, ICAW, ACCA, CPA from Canada, CPA from Australia and Saudi Arabia. For all these professional bodies, and we are going to fellowship certificate all from these 6 bodies, and we apply, and then you have to give only one exam. For the CA, ICI, we have to give the 3 exams. You can give the exam anytime, morning, evening, afternoons, depend on you. That you give the exams, SCCA will give the certificate in 1 or 2 days. Submit the certificate to EAAA, they will give the fellowship certificate. Correct? This is the fellowship certificate. First January complete, we have reached on the 1 destinations. This is a fellowship certificate from mine. Now, we got the certificate, correct? We have the experience document also, but equivalency, big task, correct? Something on the equivalency also. This one is equivalency documents, whatever required. I done my equivalency 5-6 years back. I am not sure if this same process is applicable or not applicable, but more or less this will be process will be applicable. You have to be applied through a consulate, but now in the I come to me data flow also has come pictures. You have to be go through a data process, data flow agency there. They will verify your document. It will be go to your university. They will verify. It will come to you. Then consulate will be sent to the document from Ministry of Education. Then they will issue the equivalency. Take time, 3-4 months easily. Correct? It look like this one. Bachelor of Commerce, Ministry of Economy. This is your document for the equivalency. When you got this document, you have the all required document to now go to the Ministry of Economy. That's the final that we have to be get that our certificate. 3 important document. Fellowship document you got it, bachelor equivalency you got it, experience letter you got it. Now go to the Ministry of Economy. They will decide to give to you or not give. Yeah, that's what they will decide. Correct? Go to the site on the Ministry of Economy, very easy. You will type in the Google Ministry of Economy, you will get it link, click it, sign it, submit your informations. Registration Ministry of Economy site, submit your personal profile, some other documents they will ask you, and you can get a certificate. I will try to give some brief on that part. This is the Ministry of Economy. You can sign in through a UAE pass. Yeah, you can sign in from other way also. Most of the ministries now we can sign in through a UAE pass. You can sign in through a UAE pass. This window will be open. Select which one. You should select that accounts and accounting service. This one. Click on it here. You will reach your page there. Sign in page there. First you have to fill here your organization list. They will ask your current organizations. Without that, they will not, application will not be complete. So click, when you will go on the edit, here you will find the link, edit profile, organization list and sign out. Click on organization list, submit, fill this organization list also first. Yeah, then you reach on this page. You have to be complete these 6 steps. When you complete these 6 steps, that's 100%. You will, and last you will get your certificate. Very basic information is here, not much difficult. Request submission, basic information, name, address, date of birth, ministry, email ID number, something, blah, blah. Education's qualifications, bachelor degree, we have the equivalency also, we have the mark sheet also, everything, so you can submit it here. Fellowship, we got our fellowship from ICAI, that you can submit it here. Work experience, 5 years we have, you can submit it here. Some personal other experience also, because now you are going to get the auditor license, so they will ask your signature. So you should submit your specific signature here. They will ask your specific signature also is here. Submit it there, they will verify. If they are not happy, they will ask more questions. If they are happy, they will approve it. Yeah, and this make them happy here only. They will happy, they will issue the certificate. Correct? After the review, they are happy, they will send the payment link. Now you have to pay it to the government also. You can pay the government 4,500 dirhams. Correct? You will pay the fees. You will get your initial certificate, like eligible for the practice, COP. That certificate, you will get the membership, everything, but not linked with any of the form. Correct? That certificate will be inactive, your number also will be there, everything will be there, you will get it. Now, you want to practice, correct? Attach the certificate with your organizations. Now, your certificate is ready. Why stopped? Yeah, hooray, certificates in your hand. This is my certificates that I got it. Thank you. 17th of April, I got it. Now valid for 3 years. After 3 years, take the trainings and again it will be renewed for 3 years. Up to 2 years, fine. When you got the certificates, some responsibility is also there. You have to some responsibility there. And in this world, when you have the responsibilities, fines also very huge. Correct? So now get the certificate, but see the fines also, whatever fines applicable when you got these certificates. I thought, let me go on some beyond on that one. Fine. This all fines. When you got a certificate, this all fines will be applicable on you. Correct? First, if your name is not appear in the printed materials, any of that materials, whatever audit report, whatever document you are signing with name and number, minimum 20,000 dirham fine. Oh, sorry. Correct? Your whatever, now you got a certificate, you are going to sign it, but you have to name and number 20,000, otherwise get a fine. You have to be printed, keep your certificate on prominent locations, otherwise fine. Again 20,000 dirham. If you don't use your name with your firm name, fine 80,000 dirham. If you don't verify truth and correctness of the audit report, 80,000 dirham fine. That ethics, if you don't follow the ethics, is fine. You have to follow the ethics, otherwise 60,000 dirham fine. And you should keep the record for minimum for 5 years. Otherwise, again the fine, 50,000 dirhams. Correct? And whatever ministry will ask the information you fail to provide, again the fine, 60,000 dirham. It's all fines applicable on me also when I got this certificate. Think twice. And more than AML is there also on us. Correct? Think it. Thank you. This is my process to get this certificate.
Thank you, CA Dheeraj, for simplifying and educating all of us how to go about to get our licenses. I think all the questions have been addressed and there are no questions in the room for Dheeraj, most probably because he has explained in detail. But Dheeraj, I have one question for you. And that question is, Bhai, tum sign karoge ki nahi?
Bhai, document dene padenge.
Okay. Thank you, Dheeraj, for educating us how to go about it. I will wish all our members who are into practice are able to get that certificate from Ministry of Economy by submitting or following the process which has been given by Dheeraj. And look forward to see more and more coming in the WhatsApp group saying, yes, we have got our certificates. That is my wishes for you, for all the practicing chartered accountant. Thank you. Now I will request Chairman, Vice Chairman, our Regional Director from ICAI to come on the stage along with our Treasurer to felicitate Dheeraj with a token of love and appreciation. Finally, we reach to the last session, last but not the least. And this may be equally interesting because this is on AML, anti-money laundering. money laundering is a serious and complex problem that threatens the integrity of the global financial system. The UAE, like many other countries, have taken significant steps to combat this issue, including implementing a comprehensive legal and regulatory framework to prevent and detect money laundering activities. While financial institutions have been subject to AML regulations for quite some time, it is designated non-financial businesses and professions have also come under the increased scrutiny. We are being called designated non-financial business and professions, you might be knowing, and we are exposed to higher risk of money laundering activities due to our proximity to certain industries and individuals. Therefore, it is our duty to ensure that we have adequate AML control in place to prevent and detect suspicious transactions. In this session, we will explore the regulatory framework of UAE for AML, including the obligation and responsibilities of DNFBPs. We will also discuss practical measures that we can take to ensure compliance with AML regulations, including implementing effective AML policies and procedures, conducting risk assessment, and providing staff training and awareness programs. We humbly request our ex-com member Dharmarajan to come on the stage and introduce our next speaker, Ms. Sakina, to all of us. Dharmarajan.
Thanks, Jay. Good evening, everyone. Our next speaker is Sakina Dikanwala, Associate Partner, Legal Services, MBG Corporate Services. Sakina is a Law and Commerce graduate and a member of Institute of Company Secretaries of India. She has 8+ years of professional experience in advising various clients in the field of corporate and commercial laws, employment and labor laws, real estate laws, etc. She advises multinational clients on a wide range of services. Aspects includes commercial law in UAE, business restructuring, commercial agency and distributionship, employment matters, designing on corporate governance manual, developing ethics and compliance regulatory framework, conducting trainings, drafting policies, defining roles and working of various committees like Audit Committee, Board of Directors Committee, and have handled other compliance matters. Among other areas, she advises clients on international transactions, company formation, joint ventures, and company liquidations. Please join me to welcome our next speaker, Sakina Dikanwala.
So thank you so much for my introduction. And to begin with, I would like to extend my thanks to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, Chairman Mr. Harikishan, Vice Chairman Mr. Rajesh, Secretary Mr. Jay, and members of Executive Committee. So my today's topic is in sync with what Mr. Chaudhary also presented on ethics. And also recently, the government has taken various steps and have developed a robust framework to combat the crimes which is happening under terrorist financing and money laundering. So now in my today's session, I'm going to cover the topics relating to money laundering, its legislative framework, the sectors that are covered, mainly focusing on DNFPBs, so penal provisions that are there in the regulation, some key provisions which are there in the AML and CFT law, and risk-based approach, which is very important while performing compliances. Some red flag indicators, record keeping and monitoring, AML compliance framework, roles and responsibilities of compliance officer, and some interesting case studies I'm going to cover. So to begin with, what is money laundering? I know the audience sitting here must be knowing it very well, but to simplify it, it is just conversion of black money into the white money. When there is a conversion happening of a dirty money into the clean money, that is called money laundering. And when there is a funding happening to a terrorist group, it is called financing of terrorism, terrorist financing. Now, what are the main stages under the money laundering? So it begins with the placement. So in this stage, what happens? The funds are being introduced into the economy. Then under the layering, it is being used by the usage of complex transactions, like for example, a person who buys a real estate property or invests into the jewelry or precious stones. So that is called layering. End to end, this funds change to its origin, and then it becomes a legitimate money. So at the end, this black money gets converted into the white money. So these are the main three stages. Now talking about the legislative framework which is there in the regulation, mainly about the applicability. So current UAE law is applicable on all the entities which is in the mainland as well as in the free zone. Now there are two free zones which are also called financial free zones, ADGM and DIFC. To them, they have their own specialized regulation. There is no limitation period being prescribed under the regulation. Also, there is one important concept of ultimate beneficial ownership. So whenever there are entities which are commencing any transaction, it is important for them to disclose their natural person's details. And this law was also being enacted at the same time when money laundering regulations were being enacted in the UAE. Also, extraterritorial jurisdiction for violations applies when offenses are committed within and outside UAE. Now, one of the important factors in the regulation is that the liability coverage is extended to individuals as well as to corporates, and penalties are also being defined in such a manner. There is no civil penalty prescribed. However, the claims for damages can be filed. Also, there is a possibility of asset confiscation. Moving further, let's quickly see which all other sectors being covered under the law. So now under the law, one of the sector is financial institution. So you can see some names on the screen of the financial institution. When they conduct any kind of transaction, like for example, they perform private banking function, they perform virtual banking function, they accept any deposit, they lend any funding, then it is applicable. The second coverage is on the DNFPB. So DNFPB I have covered in the next slide. There is a very recent addition in the regulation, so which is of the virtual asset service provider. So now virtual asset service provider includes the entities which carries out the exchange between the virtual assets and fiat currencies, exchange between one or more form of virtual assets, transfer of virtual assets, safekeeping administration of virtual assets, providing or participating in financial services, which is relating to the sale or purchase of virtual assets. So these are the coverage which is under the virtual asset category with a recent amendment that happened in the law. Now let's quickly look into what constitutes under the DNFPB. So one of the main sector under the DNFPB is about the brokers and real estate agents. Now, when you look into the definition in the law, you'll see these brokers and real estates are those who conduct the operations on behalf of the customers with respect to purchase and sale of real estate. But when we look into the guidance, it is also covering all the financial and leasing transaction relating to the sale and purchase of the properties. So it is important to note that leasing transactions are also covered under this definition. Now, second category is of the dealers in precious metals and precious stones. So whenever they conduct any monetary transaction which is exceeding the threshold of AED 55,000, they need to apply the measures. Now a question comes that, for example, if there is a customer, he's buying a jewelry worth dirham 10,000, then again he buys a jewelry worth dirhams 20,000, like that he crosses that threshold. So whether it will apply? Yes, it will apply. Now, if he conducts a transaction of a jewelry and he purchases a jewelry worth 60,000, but book value of the jewelry is 50,000. So now question arises whether those transactions will be covered in this? Yes, it will be covered. So in the guidance, it has gone to that extensive level. There are a lot of permutations and combinations while we are covering under this definition of dealers in metals and precious stones. The next categories of the lawyers, notaries, independent legal professionals, and independent accountants. So when they conduct any kind of advisory function or any financial transaction for their clients, with respect to buying and selling of entities, mergers and acquisitions, or with respect to any sale purchase of properties, then it is applicable. The last category is of the corporate service provider. So in this, when corporate service provider is providing any function with respect to opening of the companies or acting as a trustee, or when they are lending their name as directors or secretaries or nominee shareholders, then they are covered under this definition and they will be categorized as DNFBBs and they need to comply with the AML CFT regulations for that. Now let's look into the penal provision. As the last speaker mentioned that there are a lot of fines, there are a lot of penalties. So yes, this regulation also covers a lot of fines, a lot of penalties. So just to mention some of the penalties, like for example, non-filing of STR, suspicious transaction reporting. The penalty would range between 100,000 to 1 million. Then there are a lot of violations that are being there in the law. If there is any violation of the law, it would range between 10,000 to 100,000. Recently, Ministry also issued some list of offenses for which they had mentioned the penalty amount also. Like for example, if there is a non-record keeping happens, then the fine is 50,000. If there is, if the entity is not following the process of due diligence, then the fine is 50,000. If they are not screening a PAP, then the fine is 100,000. So like that, there are a lot of categories of violations and fines which is being prescribed under the regulation. So I'm just pausing here for 2 minutes. You can have a look into that and I'll change the slide. Yes, so now this is one of the very important provision to know your customer. So this is a complete journey we have to do when a customer approaches us. So when a customer is approaching an entity, what they need to do, they need to maintain all the mandatory documents and informations from that customer. They need to identify what are the risks associated with the customer. They need to complete all the verification process, and then they need to establish a complete linkage between this. So when this journey is being completed, an unfamiliar or unknown customer becomes familiar or known customers to the company. Now, as I was mentioning that one of the key aspects in the law is to have a proper and very robust risk-based approach. Now, let's look into what it is. So, firstly, we need to onboard we need to complete our process for Know Your Customer. In that, after that, we need to do a risk categorization. Now, how I will do the risk categorization? So, mainly, I need to rate my customer in a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10. So, now, if it is in the scale of 1 to 5, I could categorize it as a medium or low risk customer. Now, how this risk rating can be given, I have covered in the coming slide. Now, if the customer rating is high, then what I need to do? It is application of the enhanced due diligence. So when customer has low risk or medium risk, we can do a simplified due diligence. When it is on the enhanced level, when it is on a high risk, then enhanced due diligence needs to be done. Also, if there is any suspicious in the transaction, then also enhanced due diligence needs to be done. Now a question comes that what if a customer's profile is under the high risk? Do we need to deal with the customer or not? So the law or the guidances does not prohibit you from dealing with the customer. Just we need to take a proper measure, we need to establish and we need to verify properly and document everything and take the approvals as and when required. So now these are the main 5 categorization of the risk which are there in the regulation. First is about the customer. So customer associated risk is when there is a difficult to identify the true owners of the company. So when a customer is a corporate and we cannot identify who are the owners of the company by applying that UBO process, then it becomes a high risk under the customer risk. Then if customer is a politically exposed person, or if the management of a company, if it is a company that management or anybody who is holding a senior position has any background of politically exposed, then it will be categorized under the customer risk. Also, when there is an hesitation from the customer side to provide any kind of documents, then it will be classified as under the customer risk. Then comes the industry risk. So some of the industries I have mentioned here, if the customer belongs to any of these industry, Then it would be industry risk. So these industries include real estate or precious stone, company formation service providers, law firms, money value transfer houses. Then comes the product risk. Now, if the customer is using any kind of complex products or transactions, we could categorize it into the product risk. So also use of non-financial professionals without any sufficient justification, then it would come under this risk. Use of mortgage schemes would come under this risk. Use of corporate investment vehicles would come, and use of any legal arrangements such as trust or foundations could come potentially into the product risk. The next one is the geographic risk. So there are some lists which have the high risk country ratings. So if the customer himself or the company's associate, if the customer is a company, if he's in that list of countries, then it would be geographic risk we can classify. Delivery channel risk is also one of the important risks, where if the customer solicitation has been done through some social media or from some remote access or from a third party which is not known to us, then we need to classify it under the delivery channel risk. Now, the rating that I mentioned in the previous page, it would be a mix of these risks. So we need to really, evaluate everything, and then we need to categorize, and when we need to assign a rating to a customer. Now, next comes about the due diligence. So with respect to low-risk customers, we need to apply a simplified due diligence. In that case, we need to obtain the documents or information which are there in the regulation as a primary attempt. Now, low-risk customers, some of the line items that I have mentioned could potentially cover under the low risk. Now, why they are low risk? Because let's say public organization or a listed company, their information is easily available, and it is always from a reliable source we get the information. So when we get from a reliable source, normally we categorize it into the low-risk customers. Now, second category comes of a high-risk customer. So now in the risk rating, if the customer has got a high-risk rating, then what we need to do is to apply the EDD measures. Now, what we need to do in applying the EDD measures? So in EDD measures, we need to go one level up, and we need to put an enhanced level of verification and conductor diligence. So now in that, we mainly, with respect to corporates, we need to take audited financial statements. Also, we need to take bank statements, and we need to check on their senior management and UBOs. With respect to individuals, we need to take their addresses, we need to take their income proofs, we need to see what business they are into, and also we need to take their bank statement. So mainly here, we need to make an attempt to see the transaction that the customer is performing is relating or is a legitimate transaction, and the money that is coming into that transaction has been derived from a legitimate source, and it does not have any legal origin, illegal origin. Now, what are red flag indicators? So whenever we conduct a due diligence process, one of the important part that we need to do is to do screening of the customer. Now, during the screening, we could find out that the customer is a PAP, or the customer's name is there in the sanction list. So these are some of the sanction list which is there on the screen, which also includes the central bank blacklist also. So we need to check their names in that list. So now, if this customer's name is in any of the sanction list, the main principle is that we should not deal with that customer. So when we come across any sanction list, it is strictly prohibited to deal with the customer. Now, if that customer's name is under the PAP, then there is a procedure being there that we need to, do a proper profiling of the customer. We need to obtain the senior management approval, and it is permissible to carry out the transaction with that customer. Now, what you should do as an employee. So as an employee, you should not assist anybody who is into any money laundering offenses. Also, it is important to do the reporting. Now, reporting as an employee could be done internally to the compliance officer, and then compliance officer will further file an STR if applicable, and also he will file an internal STRs to inform the senior management. And also, there is a provision that you are not allowed to do tip-off. So what does this mean is you should not warn or inform the customer about these findings. So if there is any finding against the customer, it is strictly not allowed to inform that customer about those findings. Now here I have mentioned about the roles and responsibilities of the compliance officer. Firstly, who is compliance officer? So compliance officer is a person who is designated by the senior management to oversee the AML safety compliance function in the organization. Now what are his or her responsibility? So the compliance officer mainly is assigned with the task to oversee all the compliance function, to conduct the KYC processes, due diligence, and to complete the profile of the customer in the organization. Now, this compliance officer also has an obligation to train and mentor the other employees of the company, because it is not only compliance officer who is dealing with the customer. The customers are being dealt with various employees, various people in the organization, so it is his duty also to train them. Also, it is his duty to train the senior management in the company. Also, compliance officer must attend some external trainings also, because nowadays there are some assessments being conducted by the ministries and authorities. So in those assessment sheets, if you will look, these questions are being asked that during the year, how many trainings did compliance officer himself attended. So it is very important for a compliance officer to get an update by attending external trainings or by trainings conducted by the ministries also with respect to this. Also, it is important to keep records and monitor it. So on this, I have prepared the next slide for the record-keeping requirements. So in the record-keeping requirements, mainly those records which are relevant to the transaction, so those records could be when any correspondences are happening with the customers, all invoices or payment receipts, any refunds that has happened to the customer, that should be kept. Any agreements that has been entered between the customers, that should be kept. And in case of, so the other aspect is customer due diligence. So when we have done a due diligence of the customer, all the information that we have obtained about the customer, if any internal STRs we have filed, all those needs to be done under the record keeping. Also, as a part of the good governance practice, it is recommended to conduct regular transactions screening for existing customer. It could be done annually or biannually, depending on nature and business of the activity. Now I would like to present a complete compliance framework. So in the complete compliance framework, the main important aspect is to have a proper and good corporate governance framework in place. And also it is important to appoint AML CFT compliance officer which has a relevant experience and background. So I mean, we come across some cases where, you know, there is a company, they are operating with 5-6 individuals and a person who is also a sales executive. His name is mentioned as a compliance officer. So is this right? No, it is not right. If they do not have those staff, they should recruit it and they should assign a proper function to him. Now also it is important to maintain policy and procedures, to have a proper strong systems and control to detect those crimes of money launderings in the company. Also MIS reporting is very important. It is also advisable to have independent assessment carried out once in a year minimum, because there will be experts who will be overlooking the functions, what has been performed by, of course, compliance officer within the company and how he is dealing with all the aspects. Also, it is important to give training and awareness to the employees as well as to the senior management and compliance officer. And maintaining of adequate documents and records is very important. Now, I have prepared some case studies on various sectors. So first, I have covered on the real estate sector. So in this, the company was operating as a real estate agent and brokerage company. What this company was doing, it was collecting monies from the clients and deposited it into its own account rather than utilizing authorized service providers. So he was not collecting only the brokerage fee, but the entire amount which was involved in this transaction. And there was no mechanism to identify the PAP clients. The company did not have any proper policies and procedures in place for compliances, and there was no nominated compliance officer. The company neither had any records of the transaction that was being carried or maintained and any KYC documents. So one day when an inspection happened, they were being levied with a fine of 500,000 for violation of multiple provisions under the AML CST regulation. Now, what are the key takeaways in this case? To ensure that a secure transaction involving funds, it is crucial to utilize authorized service provider services and conduct the transaction through an escrow arrangement. It is important to apply enhanced due diligence measures towards PAP clients. The record keeping for the transaction should be done, which is prescribed as minimum 5 years in the federal law. There has to be a robust AML compliance framework in place, and also trained compliance personnel should oversee the compliance function. Now coming to the second case study, which is about the dealers in high-value items. Now a gold refinery which was pled guilty to a charge of failing to maintain an adequate AML compliance program. The gold refinery had a compliance officer and an AML policy in place, but it failed to focus on its associated activities on the specific risk of the precious metal industry. Due to its inadequate compliance program, the client did not undertake the basic KYC, customer due diligence, or enhanced due diligence measures. The gold refinery was also purchasing some gold or metals from the suppliers, but they were never asking about the origin of the gold, and they were not taking any data, any information or document from the suppliers. Now, there was a court case against them, and they were removed from the list of the gold refineries for which the buyers are typically referring for purchase of the metals and golds. Now, key takeaways in this case is failure to implement robust AML controls that can lead to significant fines and also loss of business and reputational damages. In addition to KYC, AML programs must also be implemented to know your employees' controls within the organization. And also it is important to perform the KYC check on suppliers from where you are sourcing the materials. Now there's a third case study that I have made on professional service providers. So now in this case, there was a lawyer who was providing mortgage-related consultations. He was always a preferred lawyer because he was not conducting any kind of KYC checks. Also, he was not understanding the nature of client's business, inquiring about the source of fund, or understanding connections between the parties and transaction. He committed mortgage fraud by disguising the source of funds for properly deposits and used nominee name instead of the names of the legitimate purchasers. So when an investigation happened, he admitted that he knew the property transactions were meant to launder the money, and he was deliberately dishonesting in facilitating them. So now what are the key takeaways in this? Some professionals can abuse their positions to facilitate financial crimes by seemingly legitimate means. Professional service providers need to be aware of the responsibility to identify, report, and avoid all the money laundering risk. Professional service providers need to ensure that they understand all the laws and regulations and they apply them, particularly when multi-jurisdictional businesses are involved. Professional enablers who commit crimes can be imprisoned and can be barred to operate again within the same profession. Now this is a fourth study. So in this, there was an accountant who was helping clients to invest, which was the drug proceeds of the clients, by forming a corporation in the name of the client's wife and arranging a loan from the corporation to another client. He was then assisting in drafting a fake construction work contract, making repayments of the loan that appeared to be the payment against the construction work that has been performed. He was also drawing up some promissory note which the wife signed, but he did not provide copies note to either of the party. He also advised the clients how to deposit the cash from loan without triggering to reporting requirements. Then it was being caught, and court imposed heavy financial penalties and announced 10 years imprisonment for purposefully committing ML offenses. So now key takeaways in this is that because this is one of the gatekeepers can help disguise the source of illicit funds, so they appear to be originate from a legitimate business activity. Money laundering schemes facilitated by the gatekeepers can involve multiple parties, some of whom are not aware. So in this case, the wife was the one who was not aware about complete transaction. She was just signing. The special skills of gatekeepers enable them to help their clients evade detection using sophisticated money laundering scheme. So now on this note, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope this was informative session for all of you.
Thank you, Sakina, for this. I know you have questions around it. I can see the hands going up. Can we have some mics there? Rajesh ji ke paas mic le jaiye. Rajesh ji has the first question. Please go ahead, Rajesh ji. Mic. Ashna. Mic.
Thank you, madam. It was nice presentation. You covered a lot of stuff. I have two questions. One is like you said risk-based approach is there, right?
Right.
So in risk-based approach, you have given only two type of customer, either low risk and high risk.
Yeah.
But when you go the risk, there are so many factors, right?
Right.
So you have the rating. First
Right.
of all, it has to be some scientific rating. Otherwise, the rating will not throw only the low and high. It will throw 1 to 10.
No,
Could
actually
be
I've categorized
moderate
3.
risk also.
Yeah, okay.
So how do you tackle the moderate risk? Because the low risk, you said the due diligence, CDD.
Right.
And for the high risk is EDD. What happens when you come to the moderate risk? That's my first question. And then from your experience, what kind of risk weights will you give it to the all risk factors which you talk about, like, customer, industry, country, geography? So just want to learn from you.
Yes, so see, to answer your first question with respect to moderate risk, so mainly when I saw presented the risk-based approach, it was categorized into the 3 risks: moderate, high and low. So in case of moderate, what you can do, you can perform the KYC check, complete the verification process, and you can keep doing monitoring. So monitoring in terms of when the transaction is happening about the customer, so you can keep doing the monitoring. This could be an additional step that could be taken for the moderate risk. For low risk, okay, when they are coming and they are asking initially when you are completed the process, that's it. You can stop there. When next time they are coming, that time you can repeat it. For moderate risk, you can do an ongoing monitoring program that would be advisable in that.
Hello.
Sorry. No enhanced due diligence is required for moderate risk. Yeah.
Hi, Sakina. Here.
Yes, hi.
Yeah, a very nice presentation, crisp and clear. My question is to you is that, like, there is a business, there is a 2 partners, okay, and one partner is involved in such activities without letting know the other partner. So what the safety measures can take that partner to protect his interest and to report such kind of the case?
See, now in this case, whenever he is coming to know about the transaction, what ideal step he should do is to immediately report it to the authority. So when he's reporting it, at least he's fulfilling his own obligation. So when he's coming to know about those transaction or those crimes, then he can report it. So in this manner, he will be well protected.
But in this case, when the proceeding will start, but since he is also a partner, so the obligations, the law and all, it will be on him also? And I mean, he could be a party in this case?
See, he could be or could not be depending on what kind of transaction it is, and also like whether he knew about the offense before or not. Like it completely depends on the matter. Like there is no yes or no answer in this. Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Ma'am, you talked about independent AML audit. So I just want to know, like, it's a compulsory, or in which cases we should go for independent AML audit, or any experiences like when the AML authorities ask for the independent AML audit?
Right. So currently for FIs, the entities which are covered under the financial institutions definition, for them it is mandatory. So annually they need to get an independent review and audit done by an expert, and they need to submit those reports to the authority. So for them the authority is central bank. Now for DNFBBs, as of now there is no mandatory regulation from the authorities that they need to get it audited and submitted, but it is always advisable that they should also get assessment or an audit done at least once in a year from an external auditor. Now when we talk about DIFC and ADGM, there it is mandatory on all the entities, be it FIs, be it virtual service providers, or be it DNFBBs. Then they need to now actually file the returns. So again, audit is on the FIs, but now the ministries have coming up with this concept that they need to file an annual return, which is currently going from themselves only, but I think in future they will be asked to get it audited from an external auditor.
Hi, Sakina. Wonderful presentation, and I had a question. I had actually two questions. One was that you mentioned these categories who are supposed to report these transactions, right? I mean, what if there is one business which is not covered in this category, but they are aware that these transactions are happening? Are there any mechanism to report those transactions by such businesses? And second question is regarding this real estate. I mean, you mentioned the real estate brokers and agents are involved. What about developers? Are they a part of this list? Because they also sometimes do direct dealings. So these are the two questions. Thank you.
So to answer your first question, currently there is no mechanism for non-DNFPB or non-FIs or non-virtual service providers categories to file any report to the authorities. It is only them, because there's they have their own account on GoAML platform, and through that only they are filing it, right? So now to protect their risk, now what some companies have done, they have made an anti-corruption policies, anti-bribery policies. So those you can get it signed before establishing any business relationship with customers as well as suppliers. So in a way, you are also protecting your own interest there, right? And secondly, with respect to the real estate developers, so currently it is on, when you see the definition, it is brokers which are covered. But definitely when we see the functions to be performed by them, and also now as a good governance practice, the developers are also, taking steps towards this and implementing AML CFT regulations. But there is no clarity on the real estate developers as of now in the law.
Hi ma'am, good evening. Actually, I'm a part of startup and we are in real estate agent. I just came to know about that we need to do GoAML registration as well. So can you please throw some light like what it is and do we need to file any regularly reports on this?
Right. So see, registration process is very simple. You just need to create your profile on that account, and you need to submit the details of the compliance officer that will be overseeing the compliance function in the organization. And after that, as I have mentioned, as a governance practice, you need to have proper policies, procedures, controls, screening mechanism, everything in place, proper KYC forms that you will be taking from the customer. So all these needs to be put in place once you register with them. Now, what ministry is doing, they are coming with periodic reviews. So they send you some assessment forms, and then you need to give them complete details about the transaction that you have taken in that particular period. So that process has already been started by the ministry. So in that you need to provide them with the details. Now also one of the thing I just want to mention about the businesses, that the new businesses which are being set up here now under these categories, banks are not opening the account until unless you get the registration under GoAML platform. So since this is a connected one, so it is important to take registration with the authorities on this. Yeah.
Hi, Sakina, this is a great presentation you have done.
Thank you.
I have one question actually. I have a real estate client, broking firm, and through them actually one of the client has bought the property and he paid the entire amount in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. So how to look at that transaction and how to evaluate from an auditor's perspective?
So, see, with respect to cryptocurrency, firstly, when we see the acceptance of that form of money, The answer is yes, it is acceptable because it is allowed to make the payments currently under this form. But since it is a cryptocurrency, we need to then apply enhanced due diligence procedures. So in that, we need to at least ask the source of fund, etc. So mainly we need to establish that what source of fund the client has, what is the business he is doing, and whether this purchase which has happened, what is the origin that had when he purchased the property, what is the origin of this cryptocurrencies when he purchased the property. So mainly we need to completely interlink all these things, and we need to evaluate and establish a proper legitimate fund in this.
Sakina, thank you for your informative presentation. Is there any demarcation line or date for this applicable of the law? Because you know that earlier there was no need of the accounts, cash transactions were part of this business. So is there any demarcation line? Second, for the benefit of all of us, if you can just explain what is the money laundering? Is it an open definition, exhaustive, inclusive, or a very defined meaning of the money laundering?
So, sir, with respect to this applicability of the regulation, it is already now applicable. Like, it got started in 2018, 2019, then cabinet resolution came. And in 2020, the ministries then further advised all these industries to take the registration. And then now it is completely in place, all registration processes. Even now they're conducting inspection also. So now they are quite active in this, and they are conducting a lot of inspections and audits because they have this mandate from the authorities which is supervising them. So that is one thing. And with respect to money laundering, as you mentioned, it is not an exhaustive definition. So any kind of activity wherein this money which has been earned from some illegitimate sources, then it gets converted into some legitimate form, this process is called money laundering. So there is no, exhaustive items that can be included. It could be anything.
Hi, Sakina. Thank you for such a nice presentation. So actually, I am working in a real estate company, so just wanted to ask, if a client pays the entire amount in a cash, totally if he is buying a property and he pays the entire amount in cash, is there any cash limit, or he can pay the entire amount in cash, or payment by check, or what are the payments, forms of payments, what are the payments method he can do? And just wanted to ask if pays the entire transaction in cash, so is there any limit or not?
So see, currently there is no limit as such defined in the regulation, but in terms of real estate sector, when the cash exceeds AD 55,000, then you need to file a transaction report to the authorities. So this was also a recent circular that was been issued by the ministry, that whenever you are dealing in any cash transaction which is exceeding this value of AD 55,000, then you need to file the report. So this is not suspicious transaction report. This is a transaction report that you need to file with the authorities.
Thank you. Hi, Sakina. I'm sorry to bombarding you with questions. You have done a great job.
I was expecting that.
Continue to do that. Thank you so much. My question is that for the STR reporting, my experience say that when you file the STR report, first of all, the problem comes is when the authority asks you a lot of questions. They don't let you, it's really, they audit you left, right, and center. That's one thing. Secondly, where is the responsibility rest? So for example, we've done the reporting, we can continue, we cannot disclose, so we have to carry on the transactions, right? Should we just do the transaction and stop, or should we just carry on the clients? So how do we protect our interest after getting into STR and then carrying on the business?
So see, your responsibility is to file the STR, okay, to revert to all the queries which are being raised to the authorities. But normally in most of the cases, even authorities are not asking anything. It is just a silent when we file the STR. So now normally people ask that what they should do. So in this cases, actually, you need to take a business call. You need to check the complete transaction, applying enhanced due diligence, that what is the purpose of this person conducting this transaction, and when the funds are involved in this transaction, transaction from where they have gained these funds. So when you are sure that you have established this business relationship with the funds that is involved in the transaction, you are good to proceed with, because ministries doesn't say that you should not proceed with any transaction. Rather, they say that you should completely verify everything. It's a business call that you should take. So again, depending on case to case, it is a business call that has to be taken, but it necessarily does not say that you should not deal with them. But yes, if customer's name is in the sanction list, then it is prohibited.
Good evening, Sakina. Hi, here
Yeah.
and there. I'm on the customer side of it, so working in the industry. We complete a lot of KYCs. We submit to our suppliers, especially the financial institutions, for compliance of the UBO disclosure. So any insights on whether there is going to be a centralized mechanism of KYC compliance? For example, we are submitting the same KYC compliance forms to 10 bankers, 15 insurance companies and all of that. Especially now insurance authority has been taken over by central bank. Still, we have to submit UBO declarations and the KYC compliance to all the suppliers. So any insights is going to be a centralized mechanism avoiding this, it will be big relief for the customers as well.
Yeah, so good question. So maybe in future there would be coming a system where you can view all the those details of the customers who have filed their UBO. And now you must be knowing that recently again so UBO declaration as of now it's been filed to the regulatory authority who is regulating you as a company. So recently they have also updated the process, and now new documents, information they are asking to be filed. So in the times to come, there would be a centralization of these systems, which would be with some conditions be accessible to the public. Because currently, if you will see, not much informations are being accessible to the public, unlike India. Like you pay some fees and you can retrieve the records of that corporates or individuals from some sources. So currently it's not there, but maybe in the coming times it would happen.
Thank you.
Hi Sakina, two questions. One is you mentioned for jewelers and all this 55,000 limit over a series of transactions. See, there are some specific industries like automobiles, I will say. They collect full money in cash. It may be one automobile, multiple or auto parts, Do we have to do some reporting on this? One aspect. Second aspect is, there is always sometimes a lot of money comes in from banks within UAE, banks outside UAE to our bank account or the customer's bank account. So there also, do we need to do a proper due diligence like this? Because we may not be knowing the source of the customer's funds. Customer is known, huge amounts come in, but we will not, but it is through official banking channels. So the onus of responsibility is on whom? The bank of the customer, or we also have to do that?
So to answer your question, so firstly about the automotive industry. So currently, if you see the categories who need to comply with the AML safety provisions, this automobile industry is not inclusive there. Maybe in times to come, it might get included. And secondly, with respect to performing due diligence on your customers. So as a good corporate governance practice, you can do so, but it is not a mandatory requirement on you to do it. And when the fund exchange happens through the banking channels, then bank is the one already performing the due diligence and checks when there's inflow and outflow of funds in the accounts. So already the bank is doing it here because they have the first category under FIs. They need to do it. Yeah.
Hi Sakina. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very insightful. I have a question rather from not so much from the AML perspective, but I want to understand your thoughts on how AML provision could possibly interact with the upcoming corporate tax related provisions. For example, you mentioned that AML provisions would have relevance to even us chartered accountant firms, right? In the upcoming time, we are likely to engage in advising our clients on matters relating to corporate tax, transfer pricing. By the way, transfer pricing happens to be a special anti-avoidance rule. How do you see our responsibilities enhancing given that AML provisions are also relevant to us? What are your thoughts?
See, my thoughts on enhancing of the responsibility is mainly with respect to record keeping, because there also there is a mandatory requirement to keep all the records, evidences of the transactions. So likewise in AML also. So, you need to have a unified record keeping which complies with all the regulation. Now also this uniformity applies to another regulation which is called economic substance regulation. So when you are filing those disclosures, also when you are filing your VAT returns, everywhere you are providing some information, you have a mandate to keep the record, and you need to keep it within that financial year period. So that is how I see that, in AML also, whenever there are record keeping obligations are there, that could be interlinked with the upcoming corporate tax and transfer pricing norms. Yeah.
Yeah, hi Sakina, here,
Yeah.
your left side. Okay, so first thing is the definition of the independent accountant. So if you might have already gone through it, like 2018. So it started with article number 3, DNFPB. So it says independent accountant, but they never mentioned like whether it auditor or the moment you have a trade license with auditing license or accounting and bookkeeping. So that's the one confusion. And also article 3 similarly says, the moment you are an auditor or accountant, you don't need to be a part of DNFPB. Whenever you are doing certain activities, they have listed them 5 or 6. And if you see that, that looks like more for the real estate. If you are helping a real estate people, if you are helping so-and-so activities, only then you are falling under DNFPB. Lawyer, notary and all. So can you please elaborate for us, the moment you have a trade license that carries accounting and bookkeeping, auditing, do I need to jump and get the AML registration, or can I go wait until I do that activity? Thank you.
So see, with the profession itself, you comes under the category, because then you could be performing those functions which are there in the law, first thing. Now secondly, when you look into the ministry guidance, they have issued a detailed guidance on the auditors. So it is deemed that auditors are covered under those definitions, and you need to register yourself. No, accounting, because independent accountants are there. So, bookkeeping, accounting function, you should register. Yeah, but as a safety measures, you should register, yeah.
Sakina, this is Rajiv. So, interesting points you have referred. Just one, maybe a point of conflict, I will use a word. AML regulation is applicable to all the industries. It's not only DNFPB. Right? So as you rightly said, I'm just countering that question which was from automobile sector. So they are supposed to be ML compliant. Look at a banking perspective. Now banks are asking very simple question, are you having AML policy or not? And we legitimately tick that box saying yes. And what we have, we know all that. So just a point for the audience here also, AML is applicable to each and every person, industry, and activity which is conducted in UAE. There is no second thought. What we are talking about, financial institutions, DNFPB, VARA, all these are gatekeepers, technically. So if an auditor, as an auditor, if I'm doing an audit of an automobile industry, and I find plethora of cash, it's a reporting by default by an auditor. So if an auditor is reporting and they say that this guy has not done anything, there is a problem. First part. Second part, there is a cash limit of what cash is being imported in UAE. So all those factors looking at it, I think just a simple answer is, it's applicable to everyone. DNFPBs are gatekeepers. If there is something flaw, it goes into a bigger tangent. So one thing which I, as a consultant also, we keep hearing from people, no, DNFPB is only applicable, so it's not applicable to me. So just a small point to make sure that we don't take something.
I just want to elaborate on this point. See, what I meant when I was asking him, that he was asking that, like, where to report. So reporting mechanism, that window is only open as of now for the gatekeepers that you have mentioned. Then what I mentioned as a good corporate governance procedure, you can definitely apply those to the extent that you are into the industry, and in the coming times, definitely those sectors might get, applicable under the definition. Like now we have virtual asset service providers, right?
Along with you, but just not good governance, mandatory governance.
Sure.
That's it. Thank you.
Well taken. Thank you.
A big round of applause for Sakina. I know we are not there, but still we have a formal way of saying vote of thanks. For that, I will invite Ashna. No one is there, Ashna, but you go with the vote of thanks with the same passion, because that's formally we should do it. Thank you.
You know who is my favorite audience? Babu Moshai, जो बैठ के पूरा vote of thank you सुने. No event can be successful without people who dedicate their resources and time for making this event flawless. I would express my profound gratitude to our speakers, managing committee, past chairmen for their kind support. In IPL, we count on partnerships. Our institution runs on sponsorships. So, my special thanks to the title sponsor, Bricks and Wood, principal sponsor, Strokes and Ground, Tele, IFCO, Lulu, AGMC, Pan Home, platinum sponsor, Nadim and Umendra, ECAG, UHY James, Vested, Nulsoft, Jedox, WMS, banking partner, Bank of Baroda, media partner, Khaleej Times. Thank you very much for making this event a success.